because you said you didn't really catch on in this new context when you met him that you're the 18th guy.
Yeah.
that would have been funny. But in what context were you meeting them? Like when you decided to have a first acquaintance or first call?
Good question. Are we live now? Yeah, we're live now. Good. Well, it was a common acquaintance named Niels von Heine.
Yep.
Most recently, he was featured in Impact Loop, quite new kind of media outlet on impact startups. He had written a column about his slush experience. Oh. And he contrasted that to
slush, like Finland slush.
Yeah, exactly. The tech conference slush, which is one of the largest tech conferences in the world, I would say, next to Web Summit, etc.
In Northern Europe.
Northern Europe, probably for sure. Yeah,
for sure.
So he was there, and with all the tech bros hanging out, and all the investors, the startup entrepreneurs, and while he was there, and I mean, you came from Finland this morning, right? But while he was there, he also attended another event, which was more conversational. So people sitting in a circle, discussing, thinking and feeling together and understanding what's going on both inside of them and in the conversation at large. Yeah, you get the point. And he was then reflecting over this, like how different, these are both like groups of driven people, but they are parts of such different norms, cultures, subcultures and systems.
So how you meet and how you discuss also takes very different.
Exactly. And that became
formats.
Quite big. It spread like wildfire, at least in my echo chamber on LinkedIn. And that's how I got introduced to Amit. He said, I had a chat with Nils and he said, you gotta speak with Amit. And then Amit had heard a friend of mine who is an investor had also mentioned my name. So from different angles, it's like, you have to talk to Per.
So circles connect, and then you catch up.
Yep.
But then there's a twist to this story as well, because what happened? Well, like you're talking there, first time you met a guy, and then I think we get to the punchline here even.
Right. So I guess we were about 20 minutes into the call, and I was out running in the city, having a lot of things going on at the same time, not optimal. So I didn't really get a chance to reflect. Do I recognize this guy? And then he subtly mentioned, I was like, so what's going on in your life? What's happening? I moved to Iceland with my family. That was a big change and a kind of conscious decision to break away from our Stockholm life and to get closer to nature and experience something different. And then, I was like, but how do you get, bread on the table? And it's like, well, I was part of 18s, the pop band. It's like 18s. That's why I recognize you. You looked familiar, but the whole intro was he's a systems thinker, and you guys are alike in that sense. You have the same interests. He went to the Stockholm School of Economics, tech interest. So I simply didn't make that connection.
But then you said something that was it his proposal? You know what? This was a cool first introduction, but got to run now. And why don't we talk deeper on the podcast? Was that his angle? Or was that your angle?
Yeah, so time was running up, and he's like, Per, but I really think this was spot on. This was so interesting. And I'd love to invite you to my podcast so that we can just sit down and chat deeply for an hour. I was like, yeah, okay. That sounds good. I've never heard before a person use a podcast as a tool to get to dig deep with someone else, perhaps a new acquaintance of theirs or a friend.
Yeah, and this is what intrigued me a little bit. Like, it's actually, we've been doing this now for 4 years.
5 years.
5 years, bloody hell. And actually, why is it so fun? Because we get to know people, and we even build relationships with people we know in a different way. Simply by having a format allows you to talk about stuff that, do you really talk about that all the time? So I fully get it, but it's interesting, right?
Very.
So that's the new trend now. We're going to have podcasts in order to, instead of going to a bar, come to my podcast.
Exactly. Everyone is starting a podcast.
Cool stuff. But apparently they're reuniting them in 18s now and doing some tour in US or what?
Yeah. We didn't get, that was towards the end of the call, but apparently it's blown up in the US again.
ABBA is going in cycles.
ABBA is going in cycles, so they're touring around doing concerts and gigs.
ABBA is going in generations. There's a new generation catching on, and then off you go again.
I think every generation loves ABBA.
Every generation loves ABBA, but it's so clear that it's one generation, then they get a little bit bored, and then the next comes. I think it's like that anyway.
Yep.
No proof, but this is what I think.
Well, with that, we would love to welcome you here. Per Clingweld, is that the proper pronunciation? Or?
Very good, very good.
Okay, awesome. And you're founder of Andsend, is that, yes?
Part of the founding team. So there's actually, normally it's 2-3 people. There is 8 of us.
Yeah.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, founding team.
Yeah, cool. I mean, we're here to speak a bit about, finding value from AI.
Yep.
And perhaps in Swedish companies as well, and see how that can work. And you have a lot of experience in that. So I think that is a very important topic and something that we very much care about. I think that's certainly something that I have a passion for.
And how do you feel about the label serial entrepreneur? Are you a serial entrepreneur?
Labels are always hard.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. Probably in some ways, yes.
But because you've been dabbling with several over the years.
Yes, it's hard to make sense of my career.
But so we're going to have a lot of fun now in the context of AI and the context of this particular startup, but also there are many interesting topics that we can unfold here, Anders.
But before we go into that, perhaps you can just give a quick background about yourself. Who is really Per Clingweld, and how would you describe your background?
Yeah. It's a good question. Always a different answer. No, first and foremost, I'm a father of 2 small kids. Well, perhaps not that small anymore. They're turning 6 and 8 this spring. Happily married to the love of my life since 2015. And both of us are, you could say, from the west coast of Sweden. And
from the wrong side.
No.
Yeah.
Be specific now. I'm from that side as well.
My wife is from Varberg, an hour south of Gothenburg, and I spent about half of my life in Ljungskile, an hour north of Gothenburg.
Yeah, and I grew up in Borås.
Oh yeah, it rains a lot in Borås, right?
Yeah. But and ask your wife what she thinks about people from Borås. We invade Varberg in the 80s and 90s for sure, at least.
Yeah, I know what she thinks about Borås. Let's not go into that rabbit hole. No, but that's me in brief. So first and foremost, I try to optimize my life, plan my life, design my life. It's probably a better word. To be able to spend time and energy with my kids before they grow too old, because I can invest in a lot of things, but I never get a chance to invest in that again.
Sure. That is very wise. How did you figure that out? Did you wake up at some point and took a different path, or were you on that path the whole time?
I grew up in a family. We're 5 siblings, and we were living off one elementary school teacher's salary for 10 years. So I think to me it was really ingrained in the priorities that my parents had. And we never went on vacations abroad, at least not during those 10 years. They prioritized the skiing trip every winter to get a full Nordic experience for the family, and then we did road trips in Sweden during the summer. So that's the benefit of my dad being a teacher, that summer break happened and we could go on a road trip. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, which back then was more normatively okay, so and accepted by society. So I grew up in that environment, and family was always very important for me. So I didn't run away from something. I rather kept that part.
You kept that,
yeah.
And you understood that this value actually.
Yeah.
Awesome, super cool.
Cool. And how did you get to, before you came to Andsend, what was your previous background? What happened before that?
If we start at university, I've been a big fan of math and physics for a long time, but also actually of arts, drawing, painting, creating. So these two worlds, I had a very hard time finding a university program or degrees that would match this. It might have been easier in the US, where there's college and you can take whatever courses and classes you like, but Sweden is a very vertical, engineering-oriented country in that sense. But there was this program that this visionary architect from Copenhagen and a visionary engineer from Lund Southern Sweden, had put together. And they didn't get to do it in Lund, they didn't get to do it in Copenhagen, but they got to do it at Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg. It's called Architecture and Engineering. So in 6 years, you could do a master's both in architecture and in civil engineering, structural engineering. And I did that for 3 years. I got 2 bachelor degrees. Then I went to the US and I worked at Skanska, their real estate development. Skanska. Their real estate development division that they had just established in Boston and some other cities across the US. So I was the only Swede, young trainee, very naive. But I got the chance and I'm super thankful for it. But that's also been my only, session in the corporate world, working for a corporation.
Working for Skanska in Boston when the Boston office was fairly new.
Well, they'd been around. They started off with the Brooklyn Bridge and the subway system in New York City. So they're quite trusted.
Like two quite large but also significant projects.
And the US, they didn't have simply the type of companies that could do those projects. So Skanska came as a Swedish foundational engineering project, and it's like, we can take this on, and they could actually do it. So that was their way into the US market, infrastructure projects, big complex projects. And then, this was in, I'm just going to say the wrong year, but I think it was 87 or something like this, 1987. When
they established themselves.
Yeah, they started, or if it was even earlier. Some 67, 87, whatever. And then they grew from there in the US. So they had the real estate development branch. So if you look at the construction industry, it's actually very, very hard to make money from construction projects. It's high risk, very low margin. Typically in Sweden, 0% on construction projects. In the US, 2-3%. So Skanska's, the real way they do business and make their profits is that they have 12% on average return on their real estate development projects, where they own the project and take the risk. So that's the department I was working at. And that one was new in Boston.
So that's the point. It was the real estate development department that was a little bit newer in Boston. But Skanska on the infrastructure had been there longer.
And that was so much fun. Like, you're thinking here in Sweden, you're just like, okay, the infrastructure projects, they take time. Building, there were hardly any skyscrapers, high rises here in Sweden. Now there are a few, because we had some visionaries doing that, which is cool. But in Boston, they were building this. They were doing labs for MIT. They were doing, luxury apartment buildings. They were doing PwC's new office headquarters in northeastern US. So I got to experience basically how fast things move in the US. And I said, well, this is fun. I want to be in this industry. This is so cool. Why didn't anyone tell me about this when I was studying at Chalmers? And then I was like, okay, my visa expired and I wanted to go back to Sweden then, or I had to. So I tried to, my mentor in the US connected me to the same department in Sweden. And I simply felt, and this might, it's a bit hard to say, it's a bit mean to say maybe, but they were like, well, go work at a project site for 5 years and then we can talk. I was like, never. So then I went back to what I've been doing alongside my studies, which is coding. I developed my first website. I took an HTML course in Uddevalla kommun on the West Coast. They actually paid for me to take that course when I was 14, 15. So it's like a summer job that they provided. It's one of the good things with Sweden, right? So I learned to code HTML, CSS, even external CSS files, and Photoshop elements too. And that plus my arts interest is what got me into web development. So it's like, okay, if people aren't going to listen to me, I'm not going to sit and wait. I don't know how long my life will be. So I'll go back to an industry, I'll do stuff where actually people listen to me. So that's, and where I can make a living out of it. And that was the beginning of my journey as a tech entrepreneur or enabler.
Web development.
Yeah.
So what did you do then? Did you start some company of some kind? Or
started
consultancy, or what was it?
Yeah, I remember I was applying for summer jobs when I was 15, 16, didn't get a job. We had this local entrepreneur who was remodeling our house or repainting it or whatever. And my dad's like, he doesn't have a website. You should just pitch him. And I did. And he paid me to build his website. So then when I turned 18, I started a limited company And I took the smartest guy in my class who was a lot better at programming than me, and on we went.
Cool. And is this the bubble? Is this right at the bubble? And we all talk about 99. We all partying like it's 99. Web developers. Was it that era or is it later or earlier?
Right?
Is it later? You're a little bit younger.
36.
Yeah. So it's a little bit later.
So it was in 2007.
Yeah, but not that much later.
No.
Cool. At some point, then you came to. There was some kind of the Andsend, and then you had this Samplify. How did that work? Can you just describe that journey a bit? Bit more?
So after my study, I spent about half my time in kind of consulting, half my career, and half of my career in building tech companies in leadership positions, typically. Not that much on the tech side. I've been mostly on the product or business development or kind of executive side. And Samplify was, I got introduced to, when I was head of business development at this agency called Prototyp, this premium tech agency in Stockholm, extremely good at what they do, very focused on building an MVP and getting people across that line before you do the next step, because everyone wants to build all features at once. But they were really good at this, narrowing it down, selling by saying no. And that was a great experience. And then I got introduced to a bunch of startups that were calling this agency, we want to develop this and that. And a friend of mine then had run into these kids. They were 22 then from Lund, and it's like, they need someone like you, Per. So I entered as COO part-time alongside my work at Prototyp, because they were such a good employer. They realized that we should let him do what he wants to do.
This is win-win, maybe.
Exactly. And I negotiated a bit with my wife. I told her this is a startup. It will require a lot of time. And energy, and I'm gonna really get into this. And a few months later, I became CEO. And they had just brought on their first venture capital round. So and this was during the hype, summer of 2021. Everyone was throwing money at SaaS companies, software as a service companies. And it was the same case here, like people who didn't know what they were investing in, basically. But the goal then was to build a predictive growth engine. So take the money and make this business grow and turn it into something profitable long term. So the engineering part of me loved that, of course.
So a data-driven approach to see if a company will grow or not.
Yep.
In some way.
Yep. So then, the architect part of me, the design process kicked in. Okay, how can I develop this iteratively? And then the engineering part, okay, let's go. Metrics, systems, dashboards, and on we went.
And then it went further to, what happened when it went to this Andsend company?
So Andsend is quite recent. We're actually launching on Product Hunt on Tuesday. So if you see this and know what Product Hunt is, be ready to support us Tuesday morning.
What is Product Hunt for the ones who doesn't know?
Good question.
That's a good one.
Oh yeah, this is long form, right? So Product Hunt is the go-to place online for people who love new digital products, simply. So if you love to discover and experience new products and understand what's going on in terms of what's happening out there in the world, go to Product Hunt, and there's I'll say 15 to 50 new products launching every day.
And that's the point, right? Product Hunt has become a very popular place when you're a tech startup and you want to launch your product and you want to find your channels to get visibility.
Yep.
Product Hunt is kind of part of the go-to-market strategy for a lot of tech startups right now, I would argue. One of the main channels to get recognized fast.
Yeah, I'd say it's like, what PR used to be. You need a credibility source. So you need a Wall Street Journal, or you need TechCrunch, or you need... But they're struggling with their own business models, right? Many of them go into events, podcasts, you name it. So Product Hunt becomes the place where you build your story. You have to be extremely good at communicating what you do to get traction, etc. Yeah, through the noise. And then you can, if you get some badges there, like you're top of the day, top of the week, they have a credibility system. So it's not just the amount of upvotes, it's the amount of comments, the quality of the comments, the reviews you get, etc., etc. So it becomes like credible
system.
It's almost like
Stamp.
I would argue like a stamp recommender.
You can see it there, but good. Okay,
Yep,
cool.
yep. So you're asking the
Lovable.
question.
It's like we had Lovable here. We had Anton here last year, and of course, Lovable is number 3 on this list.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Not bad.
No, so you were asking about Andsend. What happened there? Well, Saplify was in sales automation, and we started building that based on what was possible from a technological standpoint. Year 2021. So the first product launched in January 2021. The crazy thing is that technology, at least to us, is obsolete. And this was quite, advanced technology on how to automate part of the sales process. So the early stage is where you try to figure out who's my ideal customer and how do I find them? How do I find their contact details? How do I get a conversation started with them? And that's what Zaplify did. And so basically when you'd gotten a reply, the product had done its job. The challenge the thing that we saw was that, and this is where I get into Andsend, the ones that really succeeded with Zaplify, they got too many replies, too many conversations started. And they didn't have the technology or the systems, the behavior to take care of these conversations. So they basically lost a lot of sales. They figured out one part, but they hadn't figured out the part that comes next. And that's where we started building what's called Andsend today, which is basically a unified inbox that is extremely smart because it's AI first in the way it's built.
So it's a recommender system to say these are the ones you should focus on in some way? Or
yeah, it suggests actions and how you should prioritize them. So both inside your network and outside your network. Basically, who should I talk to? Let's rewind a bit. So you say, okay, yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah,
quickly though.
Yeah. But it's a unified inbox. So imagine Outlook or Gmail, that kind of interface. But it combines, so you see all your messages on like LinkedIn direct messages, email messages, soon hopefully also WhatsApp messages, which is big in parts of the world. And it unifies all that into one conversation. And based on this, it builds a context for generative AI to figure out what are they talking about. And it correlates that with research it does through Perplexity. And it correlates it with the foundational data that you can get from the demographic data and geographic data and who this person is. And then it combines that with your agenda. So you create what's called a playbook. You say, I want to invite these people to webinars, or I want to just build long-term relationships, or I want to take good care of these customers. So then it has your agenda. It knows the person and the full context of your dialogue. And then it figures out what to say and when to say it and in what channel and to who and why. So all you have to do is review and send. The technology does everything for you. All you have to do is review it and send. But the brand promise is, we will never hit send for you. So you're responsible for the send. If you don't alternate the message, if you don't regenerate the message or tweak it, that's on you, not on Andsend.
It'd be like a sales card or something for the people then, or
a what?
A sales card or some kind of background information. This is the customer. These are the people. These are the.
It's not focused on transactional sales. It's focused on relationship-driven sales, which means I'd say typically professional services industries, complex sales processes, where it's the trust in the dialogue and the long-term thinking in the dialogue, the value creation in the continuous dialogue that is in focus, and not the transaction and then off you go.
Yeah, because the whole idea about you when you're saying you need to press send is in one way the antithesis of automation, marketing automation.
Right.
We're talking about relationship augmentation. If I would use my own words on this. And I can see the point here, because you have a lot of techniques that are there that actually only fits a very product or traditional pushy type sales, which is transactional sales, right? But if you're building longer sales cycles and you're literally nurturing something until you have someone is a relationship, maybe marketing qualified, so to speak, but then being a deal is long way down the line. So this is then, how do you not lose all those things? You have all these conversations, but you have them randomly, and now you try to have them industrialized with clear objectives, playbooks.
Yep.
Cool. What's the current state of Andsend? Do you have a product? Is it launched? Do you have customers?
Yeah, so we started building it about a year ago with a new group of investors that came on board that were more like product focused and really believed in us in that sense, perhaps compared to the ones that came in summer of 2021 during the SaaS hype. And they kind of guided us and challenged us, and we built this product. And then we came to a point where, capital has been so expensive. So we had to make up our mind. We can't keep selling and building, Zaplify and maintaining that and have the capacity to also build Andsend, even though those were built to kind of complement each other in the customer journey. So the team was like, well, we want to go all in for this Andsend product. And that eventually led to what's called a management buyout. So the old Zaplify investors are, part owners in the new company, but it's a completely new company, and that's what we're launching on Tuesday.
How many people are you now?
We are 8 in the founding team, and 2 of us are, me and another guy are, senior in go-to-market and tech, and we can't really work on founder terms, so we are helping out as much as we can. Me on the commercial side and him on the technology side. And then there's 6 people that are working full-time. Startup founder terms.
And launching on Tuesday?
Launching on Tuesday. Yep. Launch party in the evening. And you guys should come.
Right. Yeah, this is cool. But what milestones did you put up for yourself to say you were launch ready in terms of robustness? Does it work? How much beta is beta? How did you reason around that? Those milestones. Now we're launch ready.
It's a very good question. Product hunt launch ready.
Yeah,
is a better way to probably define it. And there's 2 angles you can take to being product hunt launch ready, because we launched Zaplify on Product Hunt October 2023. So the product had been around for 2 years when we launched it on Product Hunt. So either you're kind of almost like a scale up, you're established, you have clients, you have users. I think we had about 2,000-3,000 companies using Zaplify by then, or having accounts in Zaplify. But then it looked quite polished and nice, et cetera. The approach we're taking now, which also, for example, you mentioned Lovable, they launched 3 times in 1 year. And it was very scrappy early on for them. And then the 3rd time around, they did it in a very, polished way, you could say.
And they all did those on Product Hunt, all 3.
Yep. And they even rebranded during that time, right? Exactly. So they went from GPT Engineer to Lovable.
But isn't that, even in the name, if we're now going to bring that example up, we talked with Anton on that, minimum lovable product. That's an interesting topic, right? We have an MVP and we can have something, but when you really want a splash to happen, and this is what happened with Lovable when they rebranded. Okay, now we think we are actually closer to the Lovable product. That was the 3rd launch.
Yep. No, that's true. It's hard to define in that sense. For us, it's actually a team. We've been through. It's been a messy journey, like it is for startups. Yeah. So it's also a chance for us to kind of focus our efforts to say, now we're going to launch. So it's less about, okay, is the product ready for it? No, it's more about, let's get ready for it. And let's get going.
Yes, awesome.
I love it.
Cool. Well, best of luck with that. That's going to be amazing times, I think.
So will you? But how does the launch work? Is it a part? It usually shows up on the webpage. Will you do some fun with it? Are you going to have a launch party? I'm there.
Yeah, we're throwing a launch party for invited guests in the evening, and of course, to get into the door, you got to show us your upvote first.
I love that.
So combine the physical world with the launch as such, but it's a celebration. And a chance for us to relax for a few hours, because it's going to be an intense 24 hours. That's my experience from last time around. But we ended up to number 2nd last time, we were unlucky, and Red Hat, the company who created what was it?
The Linux operating
yeah, and
system.
they're doing other stuff today. The Linux operating
not such
system.
a small company.
Exactly. They launched something the same day that we launched this Amplify. So we were like grinding on. I think I was working 20 hours straight, almost trying but we end up number second. So we're going to try to pull. The reason why you want to be top 3 is because that will give you a lot of free publicity. So talking about the PR thing, if you're top 3, you get distributed and exposed in all their newsletters, their podcasts, their LinkedIn. So that's the reason why you want to get top 3.
So what's the strategy to get to top 3, or that's the secret sauce you don't want to share?
I actually already built a playbook that I shared after last launch, but you gotta secure. Let's say you think you need 500 upvotes, and you need X amount of reviews, X amount of comments. You need to get a certain amount of these upvotes secured, so that you get them during the first 1-2 hours, because they don't reveal until after 4 hours into the day. That's when they reveal how many votes the different products have. So about 1 o'clock Swedish time, they will reveal that. And if you're not in the top 3, top 5 them, you will not get any of the organic upvotes, basically. So you got to figure out a strategy to solve that. And if you want to know how we do that,
that's the secret sauce.
I'll share the playbook. Reach out to me in a DM.
Awesome. It sounds similar to LinkedIn posts or something. I mean, you have to get votes in the beginning there.
Yeah, but this is a little bit crunch time. So you need to have a strategy. Your go-to market is about upvotes to some degree. How do I secure those upvotes? So you need to spread yourself around. Please, guys, before 1 o'clock, please do help me here if you like it. I like it. I love it.
I mean, awesome. And best of luck, as I said, for that. That will be exciting times.
Thank you.
Cool. And perhaps if we try to get more into the theme of tonight as well, which is some way trying to find value from AI, and perhaps for Swedish companies or for CIOs. I know you work a lot with helping management teams as well to find value from AI. And if you were to just give some kind of idea, what should CEOs, management team think about, how to get real value from AI? What would be your top tips? It's
a good question. So the reason why I started getting into this is because, when capital became expensive, we had to basically start using AI more, both at Zappify and in the edtech startup I'm involved with, which is more like impact focused. So I started using all the tools that were available and learned, the craft of doing so, which led to me leading a session on stage, a panel discussion or session where within the network called Young Entrepreneurs of Sweden. So a lot of CEOs, you could say, but young ones, early on, below 30. And one guy was an alumni in this network. Great network, by the way. You should check it out if you're a young entrepreneur and listening to this here in Sweden. He worked at a publicly listed company. Now, one of these companies had been acquired. So he's like, Per, can you come to my leadership team and just get them going with AI? And what he meant is get them thinking and using generative AI tools that everyone now has access to. So this was in September 2023. And from that went so well. I've designed a lot of events, processes, facilitated a lot of things in the nonprofit sector, and that kind of taught me this trade. So it went really well because I was showing what I've been doing. I had been training my own team, so I knew kind of how to do it. And I'd been an executive for a long time. So on from there, it was kind of through recommendations. I got to do between 1 and 3 half-day experience-based educations or courses or workshops with leadership teams, basically, or innovation teams, as a starting point for them to get across the starting line, a common starting line, because everyone is so scattered. The CEO doesn't have any clue of what's going on, what's good and what's bad, what's secure and safe and what's not. So you need to kind of create a unified understanding through experiencing this little journey together. That was the magic of it. And now I've been doing it. I think I counted the other day, it's 500 people. So mostly, managers and above that have been through this the past 1.5 years. And I've been running it 25 times. And you were asking about insights, but let's dig deeper into that.
Yeah, man, please go ahead. How do you set up these kind of workshops? How do you take these, or how do you make these courses? How do you go about helping people understand the best way forward?
And just to frame that one more time, because what I take out of that, like the number one, the two profound messages that you said now, if I'm trying to distill it out, just get started. Number one, you cannot sit on the sidelines. You need to experiment. You need to get blood on your shirt in order to get some feeling for it. This is number one profound message. The number one is about start educating yourself, get into whatever AI literacy programs, buy your course or whatever. So that is two main messages to any CEO, that, get started, muck around on yourself, and maybe think about doing it together with your management team to get a common starting point. Would that be a good two summaries of what you said?
Well, yeah, it's a good summary. And to build on that, you got to lead by example.
Exactly.
Because there's so much uncertainty here. And I think there was this report that was published by the Boston Consulting Group earlier this year. Not sure if you've brought it up here in this podcast before, but I think it was published on January 14th or something. And it was about, the headline of the report was something like the effects of the Nordic inactions when it comes to generative AI adoption. And there were some very interesting numbers in there, such as Swedes using, and this is not children, this is, adults, working adults. I think it was about 19% of Swedes were using it on a weekly basis, and they were using it on average 2.4 hours per week, something like that. And put this into context and compare that to the European average, which was 52%, and the global average, that was 61%. Okay, so we're so proud of being an innovative country and being, the most amount of unicorns per capita after Silicon Valley and the happiest country to live in, blah, blah, blah. So it's a hard hit to our self-image as Swedes.
Exactly.
And this is confirmed by another interesting number in this report, where they asked the leadership team, the leaders, how is your company doing? How are you guys doing when it comes to generative AI? 74% said, I think we're doing fine. We're doing quite okay. So there's this huge gap between what's actually going on among the employees and what the leadership thinks. Let's dig into. It's very interesting. It's like, why is this? Why is this? And then there was a survey. I was reading Tidningen Chef, like this leadership paper here in Sweden, or magazine, and they had done a web survey and asked the employees, okay, but what's the real problem here? And from some of those quotes, the article was saying, from some of these quotes, Swedes don't want to be seen as a cheater, someone lazy, and incompetent.
I heard this Lutheran upbringing has something to do with this. We're cheating when we're using GenAI.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, actually, a guy at one of my workshops said that it's like, okay, that's interesting. I never thought about it in that way. So it goes strictly against, it's like the opposite of our definition of what's a good worker. What's good work in Sweden?
This is so flipped, because it just means that we haven't figured out that we're going to work on a different abstraction level in the future. Work is work, but how you do it to get 10 times more productive.
Yeah, and
it's crazy.
Did you watch the AI Action Summit that was live streamed yesterday from the European Union?
Let's talk about that during the news.
Yeah, we'll get back to that later.
We'll get back to that later.
But and then other data that's interesting, just to dig deep into the Swedish behavior and what's going on at Swedish companies. My own experience before reading these reports, I had been surveying about half of my groups before, in a structured format, before they attended my workshops. And from what I saw, only 4 out of 10 CEOs had ever used ChatGPT. So other than what I just told you about the reports, there's this shame, there's this gap that just grows by the hour, by the day from everything that's going on in GenAI. And the anxiety level that's growing inside of the CEO's body is just exploding. And they have been dealing with so many things the past years. You have the pandemic, you have the hyperinflation, you have the wars, you have everything that's going on in the world. You have to fire people, you have to take care of your family, yourself. Of course, they will go back to managing the things that's burning the most. And they will not start trying to use ChatGPT to figure things out because they were trying it for a Christmas drive in 2022 and it didn't work. Why would it work now? You know.
And it's so obvious also that to get innovative, you need to have slack around. You need to have the redundancy in time in order to innovate. And if your nose is not above the surface, so to speak, then you're not in the frame of mind to get to that point in the agenda.
It's very human in that sense. And I think the difference compared to other countries, why is average in the world 61%?
It sounds extreme, though. I have a hard time even grasping what 61% means. I mean,
61% are using it on a weekly basis.
Of what type of people?
ChatGPTs.
Yeah, generative AI tools.
For any kind of person?
At work.
Yeah. At work or any
anything probably.
That sounds very extreme. I have a hard time.
I don't know.
Believing it, but
how many
numbers.
But how many? I mean, like, so if you look at yourself, how many times are you using ChatGPT or Perplexity?
I don't. Yeah.
Hey, it's at work, weekly at work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. No, but I saw the numbers there. It's just it sounds extreme, I must say.
But the BCG, we hope they are credible.
Guys, like always with these reports, it's very important to look at the demographics.
Yeah.
Of who has been surveyed.
Yeah. I don't buy that, like 61% of
No, but that is cool. I can agree with that, but then you need to look at this, right? So is that actually small size companies? Is it big size companies? In this report, you have companies up to 50 people, 70%, 51 to 250. So this is small, mid-sized companies, while the large organizations are not. So it's a great result, but we need to also address it as it is, because it is a research on small, medium enterprises.
But I think this doesn't put any shadow at all to the fundamentals of this conversation. So we can go in and bickering about exact numbers.
Yeah, and I think that if they did it on the large enterprises, it would be even worse.
But so. I don't really.
That's my point. I think large enterprises actually have nowhere close to 61%, independently of Sweden or any other country.
But you can see the trend that we are lower than others.
I wouldn't trust that 100%, but not to this extreme, but still probably lower.
Yeah, but regardless if we're lower or not, the underlying trend is, I think we can draw it back to what you're saying about the anxiety and all that. How much worse or better, or how far off is Sweden? Tricky. I think we are more. I think you are to the point that we have a self-image problem in this whole context as well, because we are very good at other things. We have Swish and we have digitized other stuff, so we think we are good in general on digitalization. But on this pocket, I'm not so sure.
I think it's also, from my own experience as a leader and as a working professional, you want to know, if I start using this today, when will I get a certain effect? Like, what type of time, energy, and money is needed to get the effect that I'm looking for, if that's efficiency, for example. And, without reference points, like what a lot of people are looking for, cases and examples and ROI examples. But the thing is that those will not, even if you had some of those, sure, they can be from the same industry or whatever, but it's not until you have them internally that it really makes a difference. I think that's from my experience. So what I try to do when I work with CEOs and leadership teams and the teams that are supposed to drive this internally, they can be different teams. Like, one company I'm working with now, it's the head of legal that's running it, because they were the most passionate. They saw that this needs to be done, and they had the mandate to run the show, to do this. And they have to get a certain mass or a group of people, even if that's the decision makers or if it's informal leaders, across this kind of starting line.
These are numbers that exactly contradict to an extreme what BCG just said. So anyway, it doesn't matter, but I think the numbers in the BCG
but don't get hooked up on the numbers.
61%, come on, that was weird.
But let me move on, because I think now I think we're onto something here, and I want to stay on this a little bit more. I want to ask one question deeper. So, what are you then? Okay, I have a half a day getting started and just getting through the starting line. So what are you teaching them, or what do you think is the main topics they need to know about, or how do you look at that? You have 4 hours, and what is the objective of those 4 hours? When is this a success, and what are you then doing? What do you think is the right, what is in your mind the right stuff to start talking about and do?
Yeah, the goal is return on investment, as always.
But is it really, or can you really say it like that? Because that might be so far down the track, so now you're overselling. So what's the real ambition when they're coming out of the room? What
exactly. Yeah, and the question is, what is the return of investment, and how do you measure that? Well, so I typically take them through a journey of 5 different stages. And if you're going to look at emotions, I'm reading this book currently by an author named Gunnar George, great system thinker and guy that's been doing leadership development for his whole life, basically. And the title of this book is Aha, Wow, and Yes.
Okay.
So the goal for me is to, during this half day, take them through these 3.
Aha, wow, yes.
Yeah. So when they walk out through the door,
nice,
they should have experienced all those 3. So these 5 modules then, we start by what I call a temperature check, which means, to listen into where is everyone at currently, because everyone will be at very different levels and have different definitions of things, etc. So it's important for me as a workshop leader, educator, to understand that, but even more important for the group
to see the spectrum.
Exactly, and because they will never have had that conversation in a way. And then once you've done that, you got to take them through. That's a little part of the aha moment, but it's a calibration moment. Mm-hmm. Then you take the group through. Let's call it a crash course, where you focus on visuals, contrasts. So a quick education where you take them from having read this, having read that, and you take them through a storyline, not in research, not in technology, but for example, and this is, Anders, you might be against this, but there's this Norwegian guy who kind of mapped the benchmarks of the GenAI models to the Mensa test, the distribution curve of Mensa test. But the beauty of that is the normal people can relate to what's going on when you show that. So you say, okay, so most of the models, for example, were in IQ 90, if you look at the Mensa test. And then 01 came in, or the preview came in September. All of a sudden it jumped to 130 something. So from being dumber than the average human being in the world, according to the Mensa test, to being among the smartest 10% in the world. And now with 03, it's, it's smarter than 99.9% of the people in the world. And then so that's kind of the things that I bring them through in this crash course, and it really gets them thinking.
And the point is not to make it too technical, but to make it relatable. Relatable, I think, is for the
but in
aha.
short, it's augmenting people, right? So if you augment yourself with AI, it brings up your capabilities in some sense.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. That's the thing. How will you relate to that? Because you've never experienced or seen it before. So after you've taken them through this aha moment, which that typically gives, I depending on the group, I give an amount of time, and I get everyone gets to speak their mind, and I try to be provocative in that to kind of trigger people, just like you guys are great at, in a podcast like this. Then I bring them straight into ChatGPT workshop. Why we use ChatGPT is because the native app is super simple to use and it works, and I show them just the foundations of when they try to give it a task as someone who doesn't know how to prompt. I don't go deep into prompting, but okay, you just say, hey, do this for me. And you get a certain result. And now it's better today than it was 2 years ago when you did that, because then it didn't understand the context at all. But then if you also give it, the role and the format and the receiver of this, and you describe briefly what that means, you have to exemplify. So they've tried the first one in one thread, and then they run a new thread and try using the role, task, and format and receiver. They will see the contrast and experience the contrast. And then I say, okay, let's go into advanced prompting, but you don't have to learn anything. We give the task to the AI. Okay, so ask me 3 questions that I can answer that makes you do a better job for me. So now we move into context building. And I give an example once again to show them that if I hit speech to text, little mic, and I talk, it gets a lot of nuance. And the nuance is exactly what it needs to build a unique context. So then they experienced the result of the answer they get based on that. So you contrast, and then in 45 minutes, you bring them from having no clue how to prompt or having a bad experience of it to advanced prompters and being able to use voice as an interface. And then after that, you move into demos. You pick a few cool tools that works well for that audience that we're like, oh shit, like this is really going to change my everyday work in my process if you're a sales manager.
So then you're trying to figure out who's my target audience and what is useful tools in their workflow.
Yeah. So let's say there are some skeptics after this. How do I show them how this can be used in their everyday work? Not just for fun, but in actual production. And then we end with group discussions. And this is where you were asking, okay, what do you have at the end of this? So the group discussion at the end, I record them, or they record them and airdrop the files to me. I transcribe them, and the CEO or the person leading the ordering the workshop get a document. Because I have a pre-prompted, it's AI generated, I tell them this, where it kind of reads up from all the conversations, and you get, here's what everyone agreed on. Here's what people are going to do tomorrow. Teams, individuals, functions, and it sees the overarching trends, even though they didn't talk with each other.
You did a consultant management report in front of their faces in 2 minutes. This is proving a point on its own.
Direct to implementation, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a long document. It's like max 2 pages, right? But then, since they've all been through the same experience, the leaders have been in the room, and they have this that they agreed on, that they talked to themselves that they would do, what they would do with what they now just learned.
And this is a contrast in its own. If you think about a very unstructured meeting with no meeting minutes back home, and now they went to a training, he did a meeting session with us in 15 minutes, and we get a report that is more brilliant than we ever had at home.
Kind of.
Which you are going for that contrast again, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what it's about. And I talked to a woman named Ulrika Spås yesterday. She used to be the CEO of the Students Academy, like this board academy that educates board professionals, right? And before that, she was the HR manager, director at large mining companies and paper companies here in Sweden. And this is also another interesting perspective then, because we discussed, she's like, Per, what do you think is the leader of tomorrow? If today's leader is like the coach, and then we had other leadership styles in the past. She's like, I think it's the teacher.
Interesting.
And then, so me reading this book from Gunnar George and then talking to Ulrika Spås, who is so experienced as an HR director and having seen so much, and then being at this Students Academy for the past few years, looking at how companies are run in Sweden. Teachers are needed.
But I agree with that, at least during a reformative period until this comes natural to us.
Yeah.
So in the context of the AI divide and what we're talking about, and we need to reform society, we need to reform every single person in our organization, we need to hold their hands. This is what the teacher is doing, guiding them through. That's not coaching. I mean, like coaching for me is like, from instructing, teaching to coaching. It's really hard to coach when there's nothing, when it's zero there. They need to have a certain baseline for you to coach them against. So you need to move from coaching to teaching. Yeah, makes sense.
Good summary.
I think when I speak.
We had this, I mean, the other project that I'm very passionate about, and perhaps because my kids are that age as well, and I saw what impact it did to them, but this app that called Catalo in Swedish. It's a cartoon figure from Bamse, the Swedish cartoon. She runs a toy store. It's like a side figure. That's where the name comes from. The kind entrepreneur in the village who wants to help out and kind of help the village. Anyway, so Catalo is, we're helping teachers make data-driven decisions in the classrooms, you could say, and giving the kids an individualized learning experience. The problem or the challenge today is in Sweden when it comes to schools, one of the challenges is the teacher's education. So then Ulrika and I were brainstorming and saying, well, what if the new leader and the manager that's needed in Sweden, the only education for them to take to become that type of leader is the teacher bachelor degree?
Which doesn't reflect what you were talking about here at all.
No, but exactly. This kind of thing is needed, right? So could we then make that education popular again? Could that be the revival moment of when you turn that into the main management theory course? I don't know. It's just a wild thought. But sometimes in times like these, I think you need to have wild thoughts and experiment with it.
But is this a good path for the leaders of the future? Do you think it's more of a teacher point of view? If you were to listen to Elon Musk, I don't think he would agree, for example.
No, he has a different way of managing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that sense, he would say more like you should teach people in physics or computer science, basically. And that should be the main core. Do you think, what do you think, why do you think the future of the leaders should be teaching? Shouldn't they know the brand? Shouldn't they know the work? Shouldn't they know the core technology or the physics potentially to be able to teach to start with?
It's a very good question.
I immediately, you should answer this, but I'm just going to reflect on what you said. I think there's a vastly different leadership contexts here. Are we talking about where you are able to have a cutting edge firm and you're having the best of the best and you used to run like hell? Or is the fundamental topic about an analog company that in its foundations needs to reform to something that they don't know what it is?
I think the same applies, but okay.
Oh no, then you need to replace all the guys in the analog company to get the Elon's guys in.
Elon did Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. Try to do that with the Swedish unions. Try to do that in Sweden. Yeah, if you want to go, if you want to have a Twitter moment in Scania, sure, let's do it.
No,
because
it's hard, but it's probably perhaps what they need.
Yeah, but so there are two ways to look at this. Okay, we are here now, and we are too fat and happy, so we don't realize where we are. So either we're trying to reinvent ourselves from within. I would argue that's the teaching way. That is the sort of...
But how can you teach if you're not an expert in it?
But
do you have the credibility? I wouldn't trust anyone that is not an expert in something.
But will you sack 60,000 people in...
Well, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
No.
80% he sacked. He sacked 80%.
What I'm saying, and I'm repeating now, is that perhaps you should have expertise in what you're doing. You should be potentially an engineer or a computer scientist, or you should be a physics engineer, and you should know the craft. Unless you do that, it's hard to teach.
But then you need to sack the leadership.
No, but stop saying that. Okay,
I like the argumentation here, so Ulrich actually started by saying, well, the first type of managers that we created were specialists. The second, and then he moved from specialists into generalists. And then he moved from generalists into coaches. And now we need teachers. So specialists have already proven to not be good managers. Managers, I'm not reflecting that to leadership, leaders. Leaders can be many things, but let's talk about managers and actually managing people.
Are you saying the top leaders of the current companies are not experts in their field?
Yep, that's what I'm saying. They're experts at managing that type of company in that industry.
This is how it works in all the companies.
If you look at Google or if you look at Microsoft, if they are experts, they come from a background working specifically as engineers, all of them.
Yeah, but the US is different from Sweden.
Sure, but US companies are so much more successful than Swedish companies.
So you're talking about Silicon Valley.
And these are the most valuable companies in the world.
Yeah, but then you're trying, how should we do a Silicon Valley model on a Swedish company in the Swedish context?
I'm just saying, it's something that makes some companies most valuable in the world, and they have more or less engineering-based leaders, I would say.
I know, and it's a very different. I mean, I lived in the US, I lived in Paris, I lived in Stockholm and other parts of Sweden, and I've seen all those cultures. So there's no one single truth. I'm talking about Sweden now. Swedish context, Swedish culture, Swedish norms. And in the US, this is the beauty. I'm not sure if you've seen these kind of visualizations of how different cultures make decisions. Have you seen that?
No.
There's this cultural researcher, I never remember his name, but people listening to this will be able to find it through GenAI.
What's his name? Do you remember? I know what we're talking about, but I don't know the exact paper or figure.
You've talked about it before.
No, I know of it, and we talk about the different decision-making styles and cultures.
Exactly.
So interesting.
Yeah, I don't. We might be able to find it here while we're talking. But what I want to get to here, just to kind of add some context to what you're saying, Anders, is that the whole timeline, it takes the same amount of time to reach the result. It's just in the US, you make a decision early on, and then people are not motivated to execute on it. That's their style in many ways. And of course, then it's better if it's a specialist making the decision, because they're aligning the manager with the specialist. So you have to know your field in that sense, and then you execute on it, and people will not be super motivated along the way. In Sweden, we take forever to make the decision, forever. And in Denmark, they fight over it, for a while, and get mad and etc. Just to contrast things. And so in Sweden, it takes like 70-80% before we make the decision, but then it's a group decision. So everyone knows what to do and is very motivated, and they execute. So the same amount of time is needed to get to the result.
Having worked for Daniel Ek and Spotify, etc., I know, even Swedish leaders can be very knowledgeable, having an engineering background, still having a Swedish leadership style that is very successful.
Yeah, but I would say that he is.
But let me try to put my picture on this, because we are not hitting the mark on the arguments together, I think. So the challenge we have now.
And I love having a discussion.
Yeah,
so
this is awesome. This is awesome.
Challenge me, come on.
Awesome. So what Daniel Ek has, he has one domain. He has one core. We are a tech company crazy about music, and he has a digital native. So he has one culture, one set of values, and that works in one way. Okay, so and that works, by the way, for all the tech companies, because they are tech natives in different ways. They are software engineers at heart. Here we have now Scania, who is a mechanical engineering, and they are proud engineers, and the whole engineering logic that you describe works extremely well as long as we talk about the hardware of building trucks. They are world-class in lean, they know how to do modularized trucks, but they don't have a software engineering background. They don't have an AI engineering.
Hardware engineering background, and it could, right?
So
there's no difference there.
Yeah, but
hardware software doesn't make the difference, right?
They are not able to translate one-to-one. So what happens now is that, in my argument, when they fully grow up into an AI native company, the balancing of what type of engineers you have in terms of software, data, AI, machine learning versus mechanical, electrical, there will be a different balance of that whole company eventually. I agree with that. And then, even then, we get to the point where you have mechanical engineers that needs to be able to talk to software engineers. So either way you like it, the software engineer needs to be taught a little bit about how the hardware works, and the hardware guys needs to be taught a little bit.
So shouldn't they have still an engineering background then, if you want to have a leader? Mechanical or not?
It's funny that if I may interpret, it's funny that you mentioned Scania. Is there a specific purpose?
I have worked there a lot.
Yeah, when did you last work there?
As an interim manager, 2022. As a consultant, I work with them now.
Yeah. So you know Patrick Hedjung?
Yes.
Head of AI adoption?
Yes, I do.
How is it going with... because to me...
I'm going to post this particular episode to him.
Good. Because so here's the thing.
I linked him to something today on that level.
Okay.
I know what he's working on in detail.
Okay, so what's your take on him moving from learning and development to go all in when it comes to AI adoption with the whole learning and development team?
I don't want to talk about it here.
No, okay.
But it's a really hard job, right? Because the core question that I ask you, what should you teach, or how should you build up an AI excellence program in Scania? What should that consist of?
Yeah.
And then you have a starting point, which I think I fully agree with you. And then you get to a leadership. How should they lead in the context of AI? If we take this example, it applies to every company, by the way. But in that context, what is the skills of a general manager that don't have an engineering background, and definitely don't have a software engineering background? So they might have an engineering background in some sense, but they have no understanding for how to build robust software. Right. They have no understanding, at scale. Scale. So then what should you do in order to help them on that journey becomes a very interesting topic.
So, I mean, let's take the examples of Scania and Spotify. And let's go with Spotify. So I know a lot of people that work there. You said you worked there too, right? So they had different development tracks for each individual. You can choose if you want to be like a promoter, a specialist, or a team leader, you could say. So there's a big definition, a difference here when it comes to, okay, so what is a good leader? Is it someone really that makes both, should the leader make both the decisions about technology and what way to go, etc., etc.,
but
and lead the
then
team?
it's micromanaging. Then that's another thing, right?
No, but for long in Sweden, we have been making everything more and more efficient. So we've been expecting the leader both to make the decisions about where the company should go and the strategy and all these type of things, and managing the people. And I think from my own experience, it's like this internal battle. It's very hard to do both of those things very good. So the people actually leading, sure, Daniel Ek is a very visionary guy. People follow him as a leader. And I haven't worked with him, but I guess that the people that actually lead the people inside the company in their everyday work these days is not Daniel Ek. Right. So there were people that were better at leading people in their everyday work.
I wouldn't say better, but there are people that can cope without them.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, and this is of course a highly personal view on things, but let's say that I have high ambition of being a good leader and creating a psychologically safe environment where people can be hyper productive and be happy in life at the same time, right? This kind of constant optimization algorithm, businesses want to optimize for productivity, and you want to optimize for happiness. So as a leader, my job, as I see it, is to help them figure that out.
Of course.
Yeah. Which means that my job is not then to make the wisest technological decisions.
No, of course.
So this is, for me, whenever I try to do that, I get stressed, I make bad decisions or manage people badly.
But that's coaching versus, teaching potentially, and you should be coached then rather than
Okay, so
teaching,
let's take a step back and not call it teacher. I'm not sure what the English word is, but pedagogik, being a pedagogical, being facilitator, a process leader, a process designer. And this is where I want to talk about Scania, and it's not Scania per se, because I don't know, the ins and outs of that story. But Patrick Hedjung was the first one who gave me taught me what experience-based learning is. So together with a woman named Kaspra, they got the mission from the royal the king of Sweden, when he turned 50, got a foundation with a bunch of million, and they started leadership. Yeah. You've heard about this course?
No.
It's called values-based leadership. And they said, okay, so the leaders of tomorrow, there's no education for leaders. Sure, there's MBAs or whatnot, but you can only learn in real life. So the people that come out of university, they're not good leaders, most of them. The ones that might be good leaders are those that have been practicing the art of leadership, the craft of leadership, in nonprofits. And in Sweden, we have a lot of nonprofits. We have a lot of soccer associations, music associations, part of our culture, the folk culture of Sweden. Ideella föreningar, right? So he's saying, well, how can we bridge these leaders into the world of business? Because we need more of them. We need more grounded people that know themselves and that lead for the right reason. So how can I create a safe environment, qualified education for young leaders, if you will, where they feel confident and that they have the tools to move into the world of business, be leaders, and that Sweden needs this, more values-based leaders. Patrick and Kaspra, might have been a bunch of others involved as well, but those were the ones that I ran into. They were part of designing this education. And then I got a chance to attend it the first time I was a CEO, when I was 22 years old. And my first time as a real leader of a company in that sense. And then I also got a chance to lead the course together with a more seasoned leader in 2015, so 5 years later. And when I saw the preparation, so every weekend, there's 4 or 5 weekends in a year that you go through, and you have a mentor from a large Swedish corporation, typically alongside. This is for young leaders. And it was like experience-based in the sense that you had a group that you were reflecting with in between these weekends, 4 weekends during a year, between Thursday evening and Sunday lunch. And you had a mentor who was seasoned in your field and perhaps lived close to you so you could meet in person. And then you had these weekends. And all these weekends were a process that you were just going through, where they were using tools of co-creation, facilitation, self-realization, and all these type of things. And this was the first time in my life that I experienced transformative education. People use the word transform a lot, right? But it really transformed my view on myself, the world, the people around me, what leadership is, and how, how I can represent something that really doesn't exist. And now today, I think over 1,000 young people have been through this education, and you can tell by the way they talk about leadership.
But it's interesting because now we even get to a deeper topic than learning. We get to unlearning and relearning, which is way harder.
Yeah.
But still, I want to get back a bit to the main topic here, and then we should go to the news section as well, I think, because I think that's interesting as well, and we shouldn't miss that. But, if you look at the top companies today in the world, the most leading one, can you find a single one that is not like Satya Nadella or Sundar Pichai or Jeff Bezos and others that are, experts in their field? Of course, not every engineer, hardware or software, is good leaders. That's very hard to become a leader. So it's certainly not the case that just because you're an expert engineer, you're a good leader. That's for sure true. But to say that you have a leader that have no experience in the field, and they should run, for example, a company, I see few examples of that.
Again, I think to rewind this discussion for the past 30 minutes, I think there is a lot of big misconception between digital-born companies and tech companies and FedEx or somebody else. It's almost like saying why the Minister of Health is not a doctor. Right, so it's there is a truth in both of you.
But I want to go with Anders here because he's onto something. But let's really do the challenging act now and take Scania as a good example, because here we have a company, and they are truly engineering leaders. They are, but they were engineering leaders in building trucks, and more precisely, they are world-class engineering leaders in building ICE. Internal combustion engines. So from the Satya Nadella perspective, they are. But they are for diesel engines. And then from this context, they are trying to figure out where is our company going. So we have a company that really grew up in the same way, being engineering leaders, blah, 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 here. Now they have the fundamental topic of, where is the transport ecosystem going? What positions should we take in this ecosystem? Number one. Number two, we're going to remove ICE, I-C-E, and we're going to spell it ACE instead. Autonomous, connected, electric. So now you all of a sudden, literally then, we need to be world-class engineering leaders on our cash cow, because that's going to fund us to be world-class engineering leaders in our new venture. And by the way, just to make it even more interesting, we think it's going to be all about AI and software. So now, which engineering leader should you be at Scania? And which one should you have as your deep, deep, deep knowledge? And in which way should you be T-shaped on the other twos? And which person is a Satya Nadella in combustion engines, transport ecosystem, AI, software, and electric and connected? I find that really hard, that there's not a lot of learning going on in order to make that new pot. And what happens now in this Venn diagram is that they need to reinvent the new normal. And now what is this engineer all about? So we have a mechanical engineer that is brilliant in AI. That's a new engineering course. It doesn't exist. So that's why I think it's a lot of learning in this. And it's actually a lot of unlearning, because what worked in the analog space, you need to rethink that when you build an engine in the software space. So we have the software we talk about in Scania. You know what? The next generation, we're talking about the software-defined vehicle. It's what Elon has done, right? So they have grown a company with that engineering culture, the software-defined vehicle, from scratch. They now need to reinvent themselves into this space. So I think it's I'm really humbled to, I fully agree with your logic, but it's like, but how do I apply that logic
Then we have companies that are not on that scale, of course, and that's perhaps why they're not so successful as well. And perhaps that's some learning you should do. And perhaps there is a journey you have to do if you're at a certain state today where you're not very tech savvy, and you're a more analog company. Then you have to have a certain type of background of the leaders. But that's not to say that what you really should aim for is to have something that can be successful, and then perhaps we need to make a change there.
Yeah, there will be many changes. And I think one of the core topics is, if I just follow the logic of what I said now, there needs to be a fundamental rebalancing of engineering competence from not only mechanical engineering, but also electrical, autonomous, software. So this whole new, this new pot, it's a new dish. We went from one tomato soup, and now we're mixing in a lot of other stuff in that tomato soup. So it's interesting as hell.
I would love to discuss something with you, Per, shortly, which is the concept of one-person unicorn. Have you heard about that?
Yep. It's a big bet going on, right?
Yeah. When will we have it?
I'd love to discuss that and what that means for the competence you should have as a leader, or if you're a single person. What would that mean then? That would be super fun.
Super fun.
But let's have that as cliffhanger, and perhaps if we could go around.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
Yes, so we are a bit late today because we got stuck in a deep discussion.
So fun, man. Thank you so much.
I love that. That's actually one of the best. More deeper discussions that we had for some time, and I love it as well.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
It's super cool. Thank you for that, Per. But in this mid-section, before we get back to the discussion, speaking about one-person unicorns and whatnot, we would love to discuss a bit about recent news that we've heard about. And let's try to keep it short. We will fail probably again, but let's try anyway. And is anyone interested in going first? Speaking about some kind of news that you've seen in recent weeks?
Yep.
Recent week?
Yep.
Yeah, Per, you have something?
Okay, so was it yesterday? There was this AI Action Summit in Brussels, right?
Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah.
There's several
200 billion euros
Yes.
is mobilized now to kind of take the European Union into the AI era, to use a buzzword. That's, I think, a piece of news worth discussing.
It is. It was my favorite topic as well.
That was mine too. So let's go there.
Yeah, let's focus on that then.
Let's focus on that, and let's focus on the AI Summit, because there's some other angles what happened there. But this is the main news, of course, for us in Europe.
Per, what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I think it's encouraging, but also a bit, lol, laughing out loud, that all of a sudden the whole temperature on stage in the European Union changes. And going back to leadership, and I can't help to reflect on it, but I haven't given myself time enough to, how did this happen? Because it drastically shifted from the EU AI Act to 200 billion euros. And then on top of that, they also talked a lot about recently how there will be this one entity for startups. So you can run a startup that has a European limited company entity, kind of like the Delaware Corp in the US, right? Where it just works in all of the US instead of just in one state. So I think these two things, how do they happen? What were the forces under the hoods?
Because these are almost like two different parts of the scale, right? It's like bipolar.
Perhaps we should just give perhaps some people haven't heard about this, the whole news.
You give the context, Anders.
Okay, we have Ursula, that were representing this kind of big initiative called Invest AI, saying 200 billion euros is going to be spent coming years in trying to accelerate AI in Europe in different ways. I have a lot of different thoughts about this, but it is on a different scale that we've never seen before. But if you relate it to US, then they have the Stargate project that came out a couple of weeks ago, saying $500 billion going to spend in accelerating AI in US, and then for a specific set of companies. And I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I think I wait before I do that, and first let you, Per, think more about this. But in some sense, it's an extreme acceleration of investment in AI from Europe that we've never seen before. In 2018, we saw like $1 billion being spent in AI, trying to do that. We have Horizon Europe that's investing some billions, but this is on a completely different level and that's cool, but also with some question marks around it, I think.
Do we know the sort of terms of the money? Was it in 6 years, in 5 years, or what's the story here?
I heard multiple years. I didn't hear a specific number of years, but it's
I
not.
didn't either.
I don't think it's going to be in 1 year. That's for sure.
That's for sure not.
But over a number of years at least.
And what there are other strings in terms of what are we using those 200 billion for? Any context
20
here?
billion was going to be spent more on gigafactories, the infrastructure for it. So they're going to build up like 4 gigafactories.
So I picked up, that was one big sort of bullet point what those 200 billion goes to.
Yeah, and a gigafactory would be then of the scale of like 100,000 GPUs, which is what they said 4 times bigger than anything today. Like Elon has 200,000 already today. You haven't even started building these kind of gigafactories. What do you mean? And how long time would it take for EU to build a gigafactory?
But it's 4.
1 year, 5 years? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be honest, I didn't read the details of it, so I don't want to go into that. But I think it's interesting to discuss. From what I saw, out of these 200 billion, 150 came from the industry. So the actual cash that's being invested is 50 billion, right? Euros. So it's all hypothetical. So there is certain, first of all, I'm impressed that they were able to get all these logos together, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
And how do you get all those to sign off on something and say, okay, yeah, we have agreed to this. 150. They have committed 150 billion if we put in 50 billion. That's impressive.
Just that is a great.
Yeah, but then if you go back to how the European Union operates, because I've been down in Brussels, I've been working with, for example, crowdfunding and financing for SMEs in Sweden. I've been part of their non-official advisory networks for this back in the days, and it's very. I imagine that it's like, the United States in the early days. You got to figure out, there's so much bureaucracy in a sense around how things are done, that it's, when you apply for money, it's still an application system that you need a consulting company to do for you. As a startup, you can't afford, it's like cost of sales, right? You cannot afford to apply for this money. It just doesn't make sense. So if this is going to go to real value creation, and if it's going to go to innovation, then I think, we got to revisit GDPR, we got to revisit the EU AI Act, because we got to get rid of the fear. It doesn't matter how much money we have, how much people are committed, unless you get down to the fundamental behavior of the Europeans.
Fully agree. Well put.
Yeah, bureaucracy is one big issue for sure. I think there are more things as well, but yeah, that's certainly one.
Give us one of your 2-3 highlights. What your path is going. I like that one, by the way.
Yeah, I had to write like a LinkedIn post about this as well, so you can read more details about my thinking here. But one of them is, if you just take and compare Stargate to Invest AI and try to compare a bit the different approaches they took. So for Stargate, they had like a predefined small set of companies, like OpenAI and Oracle for the infrastructure and SoftBank and then some other. Microsoft is involved as well and so forth. Anyway, they had a small set of companies. They have a proven track record of being able to build like data centers and AI compute and being able to build a software application on top of them. So they have a proven track record, and it's very likely that they can make use of this money in a good way that provides value in some sense. If you then compare to the Invest AI, what they say that they want to have an inclusive version where they have many stakeholders. But who in Europe would be able to do that? Who has the proven track record of being able to build a gigafactory? Or not only the infrastructure, it's too much focus, I think, is spent on the compute. Compute is one thing.
It's the architecture, it's all the engineering in there.
It's the application, I would say, the product. Exactly. The product above that really provides value, that is really the hard part. And who has a proven track record of being able to build that? So if they simply say, we're going to give, this to a large number of startups and whatnot, then okay, so how will that execution happen? Why won't it be the same as it's been in previous EU investments like Euro HPC, where they literally had big compute clusters in Sweden, in Finland, in various parts of Europe, and you couldn't give it away for free. Even if you said as a company, you can have this compute for free, companies wouldn't use it.
The cost of effort or the the cognitive load to actually get to where.
And bureaucracy is one thing, but that's not. I don't think
No,
it's the
it's
main
more.
thing. I think the reason is also that you don't understand the power that the current cloud providers provide. It's not just the hardware; it's the services above that is a big thing. If you want to build a startup, or as a normal company, or even an enterprise, they see the value of having a cloud provider that you can have managed services on.
Right.
You don't have that in Euro HPC. Now you have to build everything yourself. Even in Euro HPC and even in the AI factories, and potentially, I'm not sure about the gigafactories, but if they are phrased as the AI factories in Europe are, which is saying, use it for innovation, but not something else. It means that you can build a model once, perhaps, but the big thing, the big cost is really the inference cost when you run it in production.
Yeah, and we see where we see where the balance of pre-training and inference is going.
Yeah,
is going.
But still, the point is that they are not having an engineering first mindset. They are, thinking more of a research first mindset, which only get you to a very small part, and US is doing the opposite, which is, I think, much better.
So I think you got to go back to, what are the systems we're a part of, the culture? What is the unique thing about Europe? What is our competitive advantage in the world? And I think you got to start there. And our competitive advantage, as we've discussed, is not making decisions fast and being experts in the fields that we build companies in. But it perhaps lies something or somewhere closer to history, culture, experiences for people, places, how to design societies, welfare systems, the intercultural aspects of being able to live together with such different cultures that we have in Europe. Okay.
More than the US?
I would argue so, at least initially. Europe has become
built on multicultural kind of.
Yeah. From early on, but now it's American culture. But you have different food cultures, different religions, and all these things. But here in Europe, we still have the borders. But we have been building this European entity and let everyone still have their own cultures, which are geographically and language-wise separated. So it's not an integrated society as such. Yeah. But what I wanted to get to is, okay, so given that you have that unique resource, how can you then not do what Asia is doing or North America? What is the thing that you should do? And then, of course, you're talking about bureaucracy being a blocker here. But that respect and slowness is perhaps what enabled us to build the Europe that we have today when it comes to unique cultures and history, and not trying to commercialize everything and make everything into entertainment, but maintaining that genuine touch in a sense. But there has been struggles in, if you want to innovate in this landscape, in a slow system, it's hard to innovate. I was discussing this with one of the HR director at Oriflame the other day. I was also having lunch with the head of PMO at Danderyds sjukhus, one of the largest hospitals. She had previously been at SÖS and Karolinska, so the three largest hospitals in Stockholm at least. Not sure if they're in Sweden. But going back to Oriflame, then we were discussing, okay, if Oriflame is quite commercially successful, they're quite entrepreneurial because it's still being run by the two brothers who kind of founded it back in the days. But even there, it's hard because you got to manage what's going on in the world. Business models are changing, everything is changing. And I dropped the thought, before innovation at companies, if you look at innovation theory, which was basically my master's degree, strategy and innovation theory. How do you value creation? How do you create value between in the landscape, in the economical system, the financial system, where technology is the thing unleashing value? That's what increases productivity if you look at over time. So then there's all this innovation theory, and back in the days when I studied my master program in 2013 to 15, the studies were at the point where it's like, okay, this is how you build a venture studio. This is how you build a corporate venture capital firm. This is how you build something where you can radically challenge the way that you work today. Okay, so that's all good, and that's all proven. There are models how to do this. The thing is that most of those models were always separated from the pyramid. So the line, what do you call it? Like the
traditional hierarchy.
The traditional hierarchy, like the production line, where you actually do what your core business is, and everyone knows what to do. You have all your tasks and stuff.
So you were looking at the incubator or the SAP X's of the world, or
Exactly.
this,
Yeah.
the challenger brand or the challenger setup.
How can you reinnovate yourself? Because if you're not reinventing yourself, someone else will take that market share. That's the logic of it.
Yeah,
basically.
and so you this is the story. Are we able to innovate from within, or do we all the time have to put it on the side so it doesn't drown?
What we've seen now is that this, it works to some extent, but it doesn't transform organizations fast enough.
No.
So what I said to her is like, okay, she's very wise, and she's been coaching me when I was CEO last time around. And I was saying, but what we don't have in Sweden, we don't have entrepreneurs in residence. That's quite big in the US, and even in some countries in Europe, in Germany, they have it, for example, where you take previous founders and you hire them into a large corporation and you say, here's money, here's a mandate. If you would be to rebuild this company from scratch, here's the expert, the technical specialist, and the one who understands our culture, all the experts you need. Together with this entrepreneur in residence, you're going to play a game. Rebuild this company from scratch. If we would do this today, how would we do it? So the capabilities of this entrepreneur in residence needs to be that they understand how to put together the systems that can scale. So HR systems, finance, marketing, sales, etc., etc. The beauty of that is that it's just about configuration and kind of subject matter expertise. So if you have the subject matter experts from the organization and the entrepreneur in residence who can kind of figure it out with plug and play type of solutions, you could slowly but surely start, once things work, move people over into a fully automated system that doesn't have to deal with, all the both cultural and technological implications, the data implications that you have to deal with in the incumbent structure. Because it's so complex to change things that are scattered and that have been developed over time. It's like when you're building a house. It's extremely expensive to start changing things when you get to, 50% done. Like, it increases exponentially the costs of that.
I think I want to really close the topic as well about the AI Action Summit as well, and the 200 billion. But interesting topic with the entrepreneur residence.
So what was the link back to how to be innovative in Sweden?
Right. So in Europe, with this new startup thing that basically enables you as to build a European startup entity where you can work cross-border without a problem. You can live wherever you want, do business with whoever you want, and you don't have to think about the implications of it. That's what they're saying that this will be. That should enable these companies to set up a subsidiary and play the game of, okay, if we'd be to rebuild Heineken or Siemens today. And it's not just a game. Let's do it. Let's see how it goes. And then because it's so hard to change the existing systems. And I think we have to think about in the same way in Europe, that's where you can put in the AI money. Why bother putting in the big chunks of the AI money into the existing incumbent that is very, against changing anyway, because that's built into the system.
This is what we said about the quote, I'm not scared about the other incumbents, I'm scared about the new startups that becomes this new hyperscalers.
Yeah.
So what you're really saying is then 200 billion, if you have the money, you would focus on building hyperscalers in Europe.
We need infrastructure, of course.
But ultimately, you need the infrastructure, you need engineering. But instead of having infrastructure that goes to research and incumbents, let's build real products, let's build real hyperscalers.
Yeah.
But I wish we could, not only have to kill all the big incumbents that we do have, I wish we could actually make them profitable as well.
Yeah, that would be I think this is less, from a societal point of view, my quest into the AI divide has been, everything will be disruptive for sure, but what will be the situation where people have the best life in terms of not getting out of a job, but rather reinventing or getting to a new job within the company rather than standing without a job at all. So how can we do the whole thing? And then maybe it can't be done. That's the scary part.
Incumbents will die, unfortunately, and that has been going from 50 years of lifespan after, just after the World War II. Today's 15 years. So who knows what it will be tomorrow? I mean, this was all theory that was the master program was based on, right? That radical innovation and disruption happens But perhaps the new companies like Spotify, maybe and Klarna are better fit.
But this
to
is
readopt.
for Europe. This is a very provocative thought, because we have such a large industry that has been sort of becoming the industry giants of Europe, and most of them are at least, if not 100 years, more than 50 years. If you look at the automotive industry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But just getting back to the 200 billion, how should we spend them? I mean, now they're not doing the US style. They're not, giving it to a few set of companies, and they are going to benefit a lot from this, of course. Now, instead, they're saying, okay, they're going to spread it out to a large number of companies, to startups and perhaps SMEs or whatnot, and perhaps even enterprises.
Reinvent themselves.
And, I actually, that's one of the things I do like, even though I do not think it will have any chance of coming to the scale that US has, because they have no proven track record. They will probably end up in the same way as Euro HPC has been today. So it's a very, very risky way forward, I would say. And just speaking about the EU limited company kind of idea that you spoke about, we had Fredrik Heinz, he wrote something about this. Let me try to not paraphrase him too much, but he said something about, if I'm not mistaken, how can a company be working in Europe overall when each country has their own regulations? How is that even possible? It sounds like a good theory, but in practice, how would you ever do it? I find it strange. So, I mean, for me, it's awesome. It's super great that they, bring AI investments to a scale we've never seen before from Europe. That's awesome. But execution-wise, I have a really hard time believing it will bring the value that we hope.
I mean, and it goes back to everything. It's going to boil down to how do you go from a very, very high-level vision, and where do you then actually put your efforts in here? And this is where it gets really complicated very fast, I think. I have one single take. Like, one of the key things that also came out to the summit was, in the end of the summit, they were talking about almost like a declaration. Like, we want AI to be more open and diverse, and it's and by the way, US and UK did not really sign off on that last statement. So I think America is very clearly focusing on being number one. That was not my main point with that. The main point I have is like the argument for how we want this to play out versus how in my opinion, EU Act makes open source startup life harder. So the EU Act, in my opinion, is for the big players and for the incumbents, and against the startups and the hyperscalers, and it's against open source.
The AI Act, you mean?
Yeah, if you look at the trying to be compliant with the AI Act and the complication as it is, you add open source dimensions to that topic. I don't know how to do it almost. So it's like, what are you saying here? You're talking about an open society and AI for all, and but your fundamental regulation on the same topic is opposite.
Let me be.
And this is, and I don't mean to bash the AI Act. I just don't think it's cohesive. I don't think it adds up.
So there's a beauty here in all this, and I think it's about, let's talk about risk management. So as I see it, there are two risks to breaking the rules of an act like that. Let's take the example of the GDPR Act. So there's a fine, right? It's 5% of your revenues. That's the benchmark. When you look at the public sector, it's typically a lot less, because that would not make sense to fine a municipality 5% of their revenue. 4%. Yeah, somewhere around there. So there are two.
Act is 6%. So AI Act is up to 6%.
Yeah. So there's that risk. There's a financial risk, and then there is the PR risk of being exposed. For example, that's why OpenAI didn't want to publish Sora to the world before the presidential election, because even for them that would kind of kill them if they screw that up, and they will never be forgiven in that sense, right? But what I want to get to is, for small companies that don't have revenues, that don't have a reputation, why care?
I think it's a fair comment. Absolutely.
And for large, sure, there's different industries, right? Some industries have a lot of revenue, but if you're just a broker, Or if you just take a cut that is your part of it and you don't have the money through, going through you just have the pure profit. Design your business in a way where the risk is low and go.
So a fairly cynical remark here, but I can't fault it.
Yeah, but I mean, EU Act.
I'm a cynical optimist.
The AI Act is actually easy to follow. If you are in a low risk domain, you can basically, not do anything, and you won't risk that much. I mean, you should be compliant and do the documentation and whatnot, but it's not a hard thing. And
I think it's also, say the GDPR example again. You have to be what you have to understand, of course, is what are the most sensitive pieces of information and how make sure that everyone in the company understands that this is hypersensitive. This is how we deal with it. So that there should be definite clarity about, what type of data that we don't play with. But the rest of it, you can play as much as you want. And I feel that a lot of that is lacking.
But the debate is so unnuanced. So if you get more deeper into it, I mean, like now it's just a top line argument and then fear, instead of getting down to the nitty gritty a little bit at least. And then we can manage this. Yeah. This is what you're saying.
Yep.
Anyway, I think that's a good
awesome
one.
Topic.
Awesome topic.
Well.
Thanks, Anders.
Yeah, thank you for
bringing it up.
I mean, should we bring the? I thought it was kind of fun that Elon put a bid on OpenAI.
Yeah. Was it 93?
Was that 1883 that happened? It goes so fast. Was that last week as well?
This week.
Oh, this week. It was even this week, right? And did you see the Twitter feed?
Yeah.
The Scam Altman comment?
I mean, it's funny. He put a bid on 97.4 billion, I think, for OpenAI. Yeah. And then Sam Altman or Scam Altman or whatever Elon called him, then made a bid for 9.7 billion for Twitter. And,
But the interesting thing is about it's not about the offer, because then he also said that he will retract the offer.
Yeah. He didn't make it formally to the board either.
If the board of OpenAI retract from making OpenAI a private company. The interesting thing about that is actually how OpenAI is structured.
Yeah.
So you have this board here, so you need to understand that, right? So here in the bottom is the private sector. That is the OpenAI that we know that is for profit. And here up, you have the board of directors who are basically directly owning the control of OpenAI Incorporated, which is the non-profit. And then that one owns OpenAI GP LLC. And then it goes all the way, which owns and controls the private part. So, Elon Musk didn't want to buy OpenAI, the private part or the profit part. He did an offer on the mother company, which is basically the non-profit, which is going to stop making which is called OpenAI into a for-profit company. And if we are looking at Microsoft, where they didn't invest in the full OpenAI, they invested in the OpenAI Global LLC, which is the private company. And he said he will retract from that offer if they maintain the same setup that they have today, which is actually to be a non-profit and that they should work on open source, as they said at the beginning. So it's a power play rather than actually just buying things, but we are looking at it from a frog perspective once again.
No, but Elon had, I think, a very big point of doing this, which was not really to buy OpenAI, but actually to cause other problems for OpenAI. I think, by putting the bid on 100 billion or 97.4, which is below market value. I think the last valuation they had, it was in the range of 200 billion.
But not on the non-profit, because he's giving the bid on the non-profit. That is not the actual value of the entire group of companies. He wants to buy the one that controls everything else. Yes. And it's a very smart move.
It is.
It's
right.
extremely
But isn't
smart.
that what the value was in?
No, because the non-profit doesn't have any value because it's a non-profit. But it owns and controls.
But can you buy a non-profit?
No, you can't, essentially, but I don't know. But it's a very intricate and it's a very demonic type of move that he's making here. So I
saw some,
when I was looking at it, I was like, fuck, this guy is so smart.
But what is the play?
The reason is now that he underpays for it, and they have to basically prove that they valued more than this, which is super hard for them to do. And so he has a big reason for doing this. It was not really to buy it. It was really basically to cause a lot of problems for OpenAI.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, but he hates the progress, of course, Even though he started it or was part of starting it, the way they turned non-profit is, or the profit rather.
But why would you do that? I think this is also a little bit different in culture. They're playing to win. Like even I've heard conversations on why do we vote for Trump? He wants America to win. We are, and I think that culture, like no, we want to win over you.
EU.
Yeah, like I don't think we don't talk like that in Sweden as much.
No,
but we do at some points, and it really annoys me. And
do we really?
Do like Sweden have to win in AI? Do Finland have to win in AI? Do Europe even have to win in AI? I wish we stopped speaking in those terms.
No, I agree.
Right?
I think
but this is what I'm saying. This is the difference. America
disagree with you. I need to fight like this because I don't know if did you listen to the speech of what is his name, J.D. Vance.
Yes, I did actually about AI.
Yeah,
yes.
and how did you like it?
I loved it.
You loved it. Somebody to tell you basically to put you in a spot. Somebody that tells you basically we're gonna govern how AI is gonna be developed. We're gonna govern the chips. We're gonna govern, and you're gonna be basically.
I'm gonna win, and you're gonna be my slave.
Me.
That's what I hear.
Otherwise, somebody else will be with you. Either be with me.
So you want to maximize profit for US? Is that so horrible to say?
And then we are sitting here and just like, okay, we will never compete with them.
It's not. I don't think it's
okay.
about. Yeah.
But
yes,
okay, he wants to maximize money for US. But why wouldn't he say so?
But why wouldn't we, as a Europe, want to have that as well?
Because we have. I think we can find other values that we should fight for.
Yes,
we should fight for.
But is it about money?
The one that actually find values from AI. They can spend huge amount of money in building.
I agree. I just
foundation
don't like
models, right?
to say like, oh, let them win and let them regulate, and then we will.
I think Sweden have an amazing opportunity to be the one that doesn't spend the huge amount of nonsense money in building these foundation models, but instead like building value from using them.
Yeah.
But that would be amazing.
Let me speak.
Now it's better Toad. So
now it's my turn because I started this. Because what I really wanted to get to is like the interesting topic in how in different cultures you speak differently. We talk about win-win. I argue the same as Anders. What's there to win? I allow, please win over there as long as we can win over here. We say win-win. We talk about how can we make the pie bigger? How can we have value at us? But when I hear in a lot of these conversations on geopolitical scale, and I think it's a cultural thing. It's ingrained in the culture. Someone needs to win and someone needs to lose.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree with that cultural standpoint that someone needs to win and someone must lose. Yeah. If everybody can win, that would be fantastic. But I'm used. The rhetorics is winning and losing versus win and value. It's two
win in different ways. I mean,
I don't think it's about winning.
If we win,
I don't think so either. But it's interesting.
It's about It's not about money, and it's not about winning. And I think my friend Andreas Södermark, who's the CEO of a company called Uvik, put it very well. He reads the one person that I know who reads the most, and thinks deeply about things. I admire him for that. So kudos to you, Andreas. He wrote that he thinks, or his observation is that they're trying to get the glory days back. So what happened after the Second World War is that they were so dominant in the world that they could control the agenda. Everyone followed what the US did. Now they fear they don't have that position anymore, and they fear losing it even more to China, for example.
We had one dominant. We've had in different parts of the eras. We had always one super dominant player, like in the Roman Empire. America's been that after the World War. Now we are potentially going to at least two: China and America.
Yeah, and they have had two fundamentally different approaches. I've been to kind of volunteering trips, in India, China, and Africa during my youth, and already back then, and even more so now. China's way of doing this has been infrastructure projects. So they own half of the world through infrastructure projects, especially the poorer parts of the world, third world countries, through infrastructure projects and talking directly to their governments in different ways. The US sees their opportunity to retake the leadership position in the world. Now we're back to leadership, but this is more about dominance and who controls the world order by leveraging the fact that they own the biggest infrastructure companies and tech companies. That's why I believe, based on what Andreas wrote, I agree with that I think it's the most, to me, the explanation that makes most sense. That the reason why politicians and hyper large companies in the US align is to have a chance to compete with China, because there they are the same thing, government and company.
Yeah.
And they have cloud technology, and the rest of the world outside of China is dependent on American cloud technology. So I think that's...
Yeah, but this is the geopolitical game, right? And in this sense, you can then logically follow the winning and losing, or this right. balancing act, and you can clearly see that, well, China is doing company and government as one, and China is right now, they are playing to win as well. So there are two players that are playing to win. So in this sense, interesting.
Which one are we going with? Isn't that what his speech was about? Like, join us, or,
Yeah, but it's the interesting point here, like, and what about us? What about Sweden? What about Europe? How do we play that game? Do we even want to be part of that game? What is the society we want to create? This is the question I'm asking myself.
Back to,
let them fight with building the best foundational model,
and let us be the
best of
else.
Using it, and we can adapt it to our needs and
being humans. Go deeper.
Go deeper. Be the best of our competitive position. What we are coming into, what that could be.
If anyone were to say that, I would follow that person forever.
And then you have a
good leader.
So it's a little bit like, do you want to be the mass market leader or the niche market leader? And we can have, there's a niche play here. In classical
I wouldn't
sense.
even say niche. I would say the type of country or company that actually is interested in finding value and not having the what we call naiveness, or the being, what do you call it? You have the kind of megalomania of being the best all the time.
No, but I think you are so onto it, and I let me put my words on it. Why should we play by the definition of winning according to their rule book and their criteria? Why can't Europe set their own criteria for what winning means for us?
What happiness means.
What happiness means, what good means.
That now makes sense.
That makes sense. But we need to define that.
That makes sense, because
we need to find our own identity.
The whole narrative is he's saying, choose us or choose them. But in the same time, what he says, like, I already determined myself, I will be the alpha, you will follow, and you don't have anything to negotiate with. And Ursula is saying, like, no, the race is still not set. We are in the game. And that was a very powerful part from her to do on the end of the thing. Keep in mind, this is 200,000 pledge to be collected, 200 billion pledge to be connected. But then you have France that basically wanted to put another 300 billion there. So the game is still not set. And I'm not sure I'm with you about winning and losing, but it's about the narrative.
Yes.
And I don't like the narrative when somebody says, like, well, on this table, I eat first.
Yeah.
Why should I actually concur to that?
I let me put just, and maybe this can help us close that, because we're having her in different. It's or unpack it even more. Let's
rabbit hole.
It's such a rabbit hole.
The former president of Google X, his name is Mo Gavdat.
I don't know.
He was also a deep mind. He is not working at those companies anymore, but he's doing a lot of teaching, preaching, whatever you want to call it, due to some life experiences that he went through. But
expert as well.
Exactly, an expert. He's an expert in his field, definitely.
Yes.
So a lot of people listen to him. He is saying that, okay, so the winners short term will be those that fully automate and go all in on technology. Sure. They will lead in productivity. They will lead in making money, winning in that sense. But the ones that will win in the long term are those that dare to go for human connection. So every company has a strategic decision to make. Do you go for full-on automation, or do you go for human connection? If you go for human connection, you will be more loved. If you go full automation, you will be loved by the markets. But the other part will be loved by people. And which one will win in the long run?
That's an interesting argument.
Yeah. At least human value, I would certainly argue that that's the best thing.
What do you mean with value?
I mean, it's different. You call it
human connection.
Yeah. I don't see that as being the main thing. I think as long as the humans do, in the end, have the best value possible, that's what you should aim for, right? Aiming for the best possible outcome for humanity.
Yeah,
and that's not potentially that we have human having connections, if you call it that.
But that's such a technocrat way of looking at the world. It's like the Musk world of looking at the world, that there's an elite, isn't it?
No, I mean,
saying that how do you know what's best for the world? I think that lies in understanding what builds human connection and
but let's expand on human connection and go into that argument from another angle. Rabbit hole on the rabbit hole, by the way. Because if this is also this connects back to how do you define value, and we are coming from a system where we ultimately have talked about shareholder value, and we have looked at a value view which is purely financial and purely shareholder value. And who are we doing this for? Are we doing it for the customers or for the shareholder? Has been the classical question. And of course, already now we have seen that the value metrics or the value definition needs to be broadened. So we bring in sustainability topics, other topics. We bring in the SDGs of stuff like that. So the conversation on what is value is already ongoing. And I think that then, when you say human connection, what I'm arguing for then is good. You're talking about not shareholder value, but you're talking about real customer value, and you're talking about maybe societal, sustainability values, other values. So this is
human value.
Human value.
And that's what I was saying.
Well, there's another perspective to it, and that if you look at it, so let's take the topic of AI and generative AI and agents, right? That a lot of people are saying, okay, we're moving into the world of agents, and 2025 is going to be the year of agents, whatever that means. But vertical, specialized generative AI co-workers or whatever.
Co-workers with agency. Something.
Yeah, exactly. So when... And now we're going back to market theory again. And so when the world is overflowing with AI agents and automation and technology, what will there be a demand for?
Enjoyment, entertainment.
Human connection, that's where this argument comes in.
Exactly. So how the economic theory, the market theory works in this way, right?
Human connection. It can be entertainment.
No, I think it's going to be deeper. That we at some point I'm going to be bored with with something I can't hug.
Let me finish the line of thinking here, and then we can talk.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
When it comes to market theory and the fundamentals of it, when you study business administration, it's one of the introduction courses. You talk about how do you compete in the marketplace, in the markets. There's only two ways to compete in the markets. Do you know what those are?
Was it mass niche? Pricing, skimming pricing.
It's called economy of scope and economy of differentiation. No, economy of scope and economy of scale.
Right.
Economy of scale essentially means that you compete on price.
Yeah, mass market price.
Economy of scale scope means that you compete on being different.
Yeah.
So when everyone is the same, demand is going to increase for the ones that are different. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop there. What's that going to mean when the world is overflooding with agents? What's going to be differentiating then?
The human touch in what you do, potentially. And then the summary word is human connection, but it's somewhere the human touch, it's the human element, it's the authenticity of human relation, maybe.
We see that already now. I mean, I'm experimenting with it every day in business models. Like when we went from a premium product, SaaS product, that was packaged as also a professional service delivery, so you got customer success included. You could charge a premium of 10x compared to when it's just a piece of software. I think this is just the beginning of this, that people are going to be much more willing to pay a substantial premium for talking to a real human being and talking deeply or being close to a real human being. Which there's going to be money for. There's going to be available money because it's going to be released in the system, right?
It's a scarcity problem then, because you have a large number of AI agents to speak to, but there's a scarcity of humans.
Abundance of AI agents due to infrastructure and
So the scarcity will be in the human relation, in the human connection, and therefore there will be a niche differentiation strategy here.
In humans, that's where the scarcity will be compared to the amount of agents.
Yeah, if it's flooded,
Yeah. But what's the point? I don't see the point, really. I mean,
we're discussing
if you were to build a business,
back to Europe.
What should we be good at? What should we aim for? What is our thing?
We're saying that the strength of Europe is culture, tradition, etc., and that's what Ursula and
I don't buy that by the way, but okay, still.
Yeah. So I think that we still have a shot in the game, but that's why I started off. I was a bit surprised with how the shift, because they've been going on this one line. But perhaps there is this balance game that if you can't innovate, like innovation is all about combining things in a new way, but it's also about being very close to the customer and the markets at all times. So if you have a problem innovating because there's so much regulation, how are you going to build then the human connection will just be a conversation. It will never turn into business. So there's this balance game where you're going to find a format, European entity or whatever for a startup, to enable someone talking to humans, really understanding and observing what they need and making a business out of it.
Do you think humans is better at understanding what you need than AI?
That's another topic of deep conversation.
No, but I think, Europe could have I think it would be awesome to find a differentiator, so to speak, a USP for Europe that's different from other places in the world. And I think there are. And I think, if we were to play the game of trustworthy AI or being the continent that potentially is valuing human values, if you call it that, more than others, and perhaps regulation will cause that we don't have the same economical power as other people have, but we will have a more safe products and companies that we can trust more. I think that could be a very, very interesting play and something that we actually could build on. And I think people would be interested in that and know that, okay, if it comes from Europe, we can trust it. Yeah, that could be a really good play, and I think we should do it, and I think we are doing it, but not to what extreme whatsoever, so to speak.
But I think either way we are conversing about this, I think we all can agree at the end of this several rabbit holes that we should probably not try to compete on the exact same terms and approaches as China or US.
Let them fight it out, and we can reap the benefits in other ways.
Figure out our USP for Europe.
Exactly. So what we compete on doesn't have to be the same thing as what we're good at or the infrastructure part. So it's two different questions, right?
I think we came to some kind of agreement there. It's amazing.
There's amazing
40 minutes.
But try to make sections out of this one, Goran. Good luck.
I have no sections at all. Okay, should we try to
try a couple of
we promised to go to the one-person unicorn kind of topic. So let me give a quick intro, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking here. So Sam Altman made this kind of bet to other people. I'm not sure who he made a bet with, if it was Elon or someone, but he made a bet that at some point in time, and not too far in the future, we will have a unicorn company worth $1 billion that is created and run by a single person, a one-person unicorn. And of course, it's because AI is running the rest. So what would that mean for the future? If we believe that's the direction we're going, that we can have single people or fewer and fewer people being able to build value in companies that provides true value in some sense, what does that mean really for what we should be educated in, how we should drive our business, how we should build our business models and whatnot? Per, what do you think about this? Is this
It's one of my favorite topics.
Okay, another rabbit hole.
Let's go. It's a 3-hour episode now, guys.
No, but let me take some concrete examples to not go too fluffy. So the two companies I'm involved with right now, we have Catalo in the edtech sector, kind of like an impact startup, and then we have Zaplify that kind of turned into Andsend, or it's a separate company and a new company. But what I've seen here firsthand is this play out, not necessarily with the $1 billion company, but I think these examples might be useful for people listening and for the conversation. So at Zaplify, we built this, when I was CEO, in a year, we built this predictive sales machinery. We'd never done that before. That was possible because the technology, the SaaS technology, did a lot of the work that kind of just worked. And this is a fairly new thing, right? That type of cloud software that just works, where you don't need a huge team to manage it. However, then, when capital started becoming very expensive, we could not make a loss every month. So there was a decision to change the business model to self-service. Self-service is an attempt to drive down the costs of bringing new customers on board. What happened then is basically that the sales and marketing department disappeared. We only had customer success left, the ones that take care of existing customers. So we had to start replacing, you could say, or we had to make an attempt at trying to create similar value and keep growing, but with a new strategy. So to this point, we were able to, I would say, I mean, it's not fair to compare apples and pears in that sense, but we were able to maintain or grow the revenue. It didn't work out perfectly because it was a transition, of course, that's very hard to do if you don't know how to do that, moving from like professional services delivery with a software to fully self-service, where people discover it, they do freemium, and then they grow from there. Catalo, so we lost about 10 employees, so we were able to deliver the same value. That's the point. Catalo, it's self-funded, so it's not venture capital backed that Saplify was. And here is the two founders that have a whole career behind them, and they're extremely careful with how they use their money because they know they're doing it to schools and they're helping the society in different ways. And I highly respect that. That also means that you don't want to hire people. You don't want to increase. So you're trying to let the technology be so without bugs and so self-serving that it just works. And this is to a group that, sure, they can use technology, teachers and schools, but they're not the tech startups, entrepreneurs, and in that sense, running around. So
it needs to be super usable.
Super easy, super usable, and just work.
And use work.
Just work, right? The beauty here is that I would say that we have been able to scale the company to twice the size, twice the user base, and still just being 1.5 FTEs, full-time employees. So we're seeing early indications that self-service companies enables this, as long as you don't fall into the trap of just hiring, because that's what you're supposed to do when you get venture capital. So what we're seeing now, and take a company like Lovable as an example, right? And then you look at the market evaluation of Cursor, which has been a lot of buzz around. So it's been when it comes to revenue, no company ever in history has passed the $100 million revenue mark in such a short time. 21 months from inception.
They beat ChatGPT as well?
Yeah, by far. If you check out the graphs, it's insane.
For Cursor, you mean?
Cursor. So from 0 to $100 million in revenue in 21 months since inception.
Interesting.
So then of course you look like a company like Lovable, and it's a loved company right now, right? It's Stockholm's also proud child and anyway as well. Yeah. So you can love it. It's a love-hate relationship.
Yes.
They need to raise capital now. Because when
do they?
Huh?
Do they?
I think so, because you got to buy, and this goes back to my, master program. When OpenAI sees how much revenue there is in the middleware space, the application layer, they're going to move, and you're already seeing it. I think they're going to move fast as into that space. So these companies,
easier said than done. They could have done the same for Cursor, right?
Yeah, but wait and see.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they? There's no copyright.
The same argument. Let me give a Spotify anecdote then. So Spotify was super scared about this as well. They were competing at Google, Apple, Amazon. All were trying to launch the music service, and they were doing it time and time again. And I remember in 2014, Apple were going to launch, after iTunes and whatnot, their new Apple Music service, and everyone was super scared and said, how can we have any chance to like a super company like Apple to compete, in the music service? But we did, and it is actually not impossible for startups to compete against hyperscalers. And what hyperscalers say, a number of times, is they're not really afraid about the incumbents. They're really afraid about the startups that have the ability to move super fast and come up with these kind of very innovative moves. So I think there are chances for Lovable and Cursor to continue to proceed.
But and to connect those two arguments, I agree with what you're saying, but I also agree with then you need to move on that position. And as you said, move fast. You need to be super fast now, because it's this point in time when you have laser focus on what you're doing. This is the time where you need capital to build any kind of moat, because the moat right now is not big enough. But and this is what Spotify did. They were actually able to do something really brilliant in how the streaming worked and the experience and everything like that. And they got the cash right when they needed it in order to really be quite ahead of Apple in terms of market dominance and being the platform.
But not only that, I think Daniel said something that Elon and everyone else is saying these days, which is that Daniel Ek had this kind of big town hall speech in 2014 to try to calm every employee down, because everyone was super scared. They're going to launch this kind of big Apple thing in a few days, and they said we're going to be bankrupt in a few weeks or something. That was the scare of that moment, and Daniel Ek came up and gave this kind of big speech that calmed everyone down in a very, very strong way. And he basically said something like, yeah, Apple is going to launch soon. They may have a new feature, a new functionality that we haven't thought about, some kind of innovative way of delivering and streaming music that we haven't thought about. But I'm not scared about that. I'm not scared about that at all, because we, as a company, is moving much faster than Apple. We have an ability to develop and have actually more people and speed than Apple does, to an extreme. So even if they do that, we will catch up and we win in the end. And that's what they did.
But I think these two are the same arguments why Lovable, in the situation where they are now, they have some money and they're making money now. So for this end, they don't need more money. But exactly to do what Daniel is saying, we're not scared. We need to be super fast. We need to do this. I would argue that they are coming into a ball game now. If this works, they need to really now continue exponentially with the same speed they've had. They need to exponentially keep it. That's where the money comes in.
And I think this is where both Cursor and the likes will have a challenge. The retention problem.
Retention, but also it's a distribution problem, because the modes that a lot of people are speaking about with the big tech companies. If Microsoft put it in VS Code and they just have as a free service, how would they ever compete, right?
And that's when they lose. So they have to raise hundreds of millions so that they buy themselves the runway to be able to differentiate in a new way.
Maybe. But I think it shouldn't be that hard, because that means that no startup would have a chance whatsoever. As soon as the startup comes up, either they're going to be acquired by a tech giant, which happen all the time, and that's a good exit for a lot of companies.
That's a good exit,
right? Yeah. And the other alternative in trying to fight a big tech giant is speed. And there's been cases, a large number of them.
But can you continue the speed without, by defaulting, then you're becoming a hyperscaler rather than a startup? So your costume is a hyperscaler, a young one, rather than a startup. So I think there is a costume situation here, that we can have a startup costume, and at some point when this is going fast, if you want to continue this trajectory, now your costume is actually a young hyperscaler in Spotify in 2012 or 2010. So when was Spotify a startup? When would we define Spotify as a startup, and when would we define them as a hyperscaler? So when did that happen?
Let's go back to I want to go back to the core question of when we'll reach a unicorn.
Yes, that's actually a better question.
Let's go back to the Lovable team, right? So they've been able to hyperscale, let's call it, at an early stage.
Yes.
They ran several iterations, and finally, things hit the market and just they took off. They're not that many people. No. As you know, you've been interviewing Anton back then, and now there are a few more, but not that many people. And I know the guys behind Encore as well, Encore.dev. Andre Eriksson, he was working at Spotify back in the days, one of the staff engineers, super smart and kind guy. And it's the same thing. They are also quite few people, but they're extremely good at what they do. Okay, so is there anything here that says that these need to hire more people, and for what? And that's where we get to the point, okay, when we're going to reach the first company with a one person show.
Can you now flip the hyperscaling part? It's not in numbers of people, but it's in other ways. That's what we get.
Exactly. And I don't think Sweden and Europe might become some of the first when it comes to billion-dollar companies with below 10 people, because that's where we're seeing it Lovable. We're seeing it at other companies as well. But I think that the US or Asia is going to win at the one-person show Why? Because there is more normatively okay to do something on your own, that you're the star of the show and you build a little media house around yourself. And
It's
there
a
is
culture thing.
there's a blueprint for it. So as long as you don't figure out how to use agents,
if you were to be able to build a one-person unicorn, wouldn't you do it?
I'm a Swede. I prioritize my family right now. No.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it's a distinction between a one-person unicorn or a 5-person unicorn. So even if you do a 5-person unicorn, it's the team, right?
Yep.
And that is not the one-person unicorn. That is very solo, by the way.
Yeah, I think the first. This is also another question. So you talked about distribution, that's being a competitive advantage. I agree. It's either distribution or that you're very close to the customer you're developing for. So you understand their needs and you can observe them at all times. What are those paths you're going to choose strategically? But let's make a guess here. Is the first billionaire, the one-man show, one-woman show, is that going to be someone who builds a feature in a distribution system? So like to call an API as a product, for example, or core, some data core that kind of manages stuff as a middle layer thing. Or is it going to be an influencer who builds a little media house around themselves? I think that's an interesting question and another interesting thing to gamble about. Because where does the revenue lie? And sure, this thing, guys or girl that goes for distribution, you will never see them until they reach the valuation and if they get into media. The other person you will see, they will tell the whole world about it on YouTube, right? How I reached.
But that's a good. Well, what do you think? Which one? Because I can also see that the one doing the brilliant thing that gets patented and that is in every single machine. That's the unicorn feature man. I can see that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I like Gustav Söderström is the CPO and CTO of Spotify, and he gives a lot of talks about AI. And I said something I think recently that was kind of interesting. And he was asked, what happened in AI or AGI Future potentially. And we can see that today we work a lot with things we have to work for. We have to make a living in some way, and we have a set of products and services that are either stuff you have to do or is stuff you want to do. Want to do means entertainment, means movies and games and things we do for entertainment or stuff we want to do. And then we have stuff we must do. We must have roads, we must have food, we must have buildings and stuff. So the shift potential in the future will go from stuff we must have to stuff we want to have. And the amount of work we will spend, perhaps especially for humans, will move more and more into the stuff we want to do rather than the stuff we must do. And I think that's kind of an interesting insight. And I think that potentially where the one-person unicorn will move to more and more, it's for things that we want to do. And then the influencer, they spoke about comes more and more into play. Yeah. It's not really, the unicorn won't come from a company that provides the best car in the world, potentially. That will be so cheap and easy to do and everything is automized. But the thing it really makes money from is the thing that is scarce, which is actually humans, which is actually, we have an awesome influencer here suddenly. You can't copy that. People won't, it's like playing chess, you can see AI winning in chess over humans in any way and form. You still want to watch humans playing chess, and that's scarce. So I think, that kind of movement towards stuff we want to have rather than must have is going to be the thing in the future. And then I think that's what the unicorn is going to be in the future.
But can we then go back to, okay, you have explored the space, where will the unicorn fall out? What different unicorns? And now circle back to the core question. With that as a context, as a large context, what are the competences that we should go for and where we should educate ourselves to put ourselves in a situation that even if we don't get to the one unicorn company, you are clearly seeing a trend that, if we have a good damn team of 10, we can do magic if we do it with tech around us. So let's expand from 1 to 10 or in that neighborhood. What is the competences and leadership that we want to excel in this context then? What do we think?
I think, one perspective is to say, okay, let's have a piece of software at the core, and that's our product. That's more towards than the distribution space. Then if you're going to go into the more human space, you could talk about the agency of tomorrow, consulting company of tomorrow. Okay, because that's typically where the human is the product, right? So in a consulting company, the human
Time and
is
material. Is that what you mean? With
the human being, like without the humans, a consulting company has no product.
Yeah. Okay.
But the technology company has a product because it's technology. Okay, so this differentiation. So then technology company, fine. Distribution, you can innovate in many different ways, and you just gotta have, if you know someone who will put your little thing in and no one will ever discover it, you charge a little bit, it's like the financial system, you charge a little bit every time, all of a sudden you have your first one man, woman.
Yeah, and in this
company.
context, it's about understanding the market and a market problem, being able to see it that no one else sees, and then being able to some degree have the engineering capacity with a set of tools to think this out and execute on it.
Yep.
So then you need some engineering skills. Even if you're not an engineer, you need to still configure it, so to speak.
But let's take Lovable as an example again. And then you say, okay, they just launched their agency program. So they have their first agency partner. I've seen this in the world of go-to-market tools before, that there are some agencies that have grown like hyperscale rate because they were consulting by implementing a technology that is so simple that you don't need consulting to implement it, but because people are so slow at adopting,
exactly,
there is a big business for it, and people are willing to pay a premium because it doesn't matter how good the technology is unless the people use it.
Exactly.
Okay, so I see us moving into a new time where, if someone is smart enough, you could build an agency. I'm not sure if it's an agency partner to Lovable, but you don't need to code to be able then to deliver solutions at really high speed. What if you can build agents that build stuff with Lovable that gets delivered, and the person who buys the service thinks it's a human thing because you were on the phone with them for 5 minutes?
Yeah,
that's where I see that's how you're able to get the human part. If you're able to do this one action, for example, if you were this influencer instead, you do a voice recording and that creates your whole content flower. You have a thought, blah blah blah, and then it creates your whole content flower with e-learning, with this and that.
But using that example and now sucking out what's the competences in there, I would argue, and even to the point where Anton said it on the show here, what was he focusing on in his leadership? So I see two major parts to something that's going to be really, really important competences. One part is this system thinking. Because whatever you're doing with all this stuff, and you need to imagine not only this on a fluffy level, but you need to figure this industrialized approach out.
Yep.
So this fundamental skill of system thinking and understanding where this goes, and then not just hiring people, but actually fixing, we need that agent and that agent. So this is system thinking. The other one that I think is equally important, and I would argue even if it's the one-man band or if it's a five-man band, and this is Anton's words, whoever understands how you create team flow. So that whole thing, we are able to not only think things up, but we are moving and executing in extreme speed. That the team from idea to shipping goes fast. So that would be very interesting, that even if you're building a company full of agents as co-workers, you need to figure out how to get speed with those co-workers. Or if you have a team of 5, you need to do it, finding that we are gelling. So this whole thing of how we find compatibility, how we find teamwork to work, that's going to be an interesting topic. Because
perhaps that could be a good segue into at least one last topic, and then the final question. And we've been talking far too long already, but
that's an interesting thought experiment.
I think the question that we potentially were thinking about. What does leadership really mean in a future of AI, in an AI era in some sense? I'm not sure if you heard about the Tesla Agile DNA and how they work with teams and leadership in those companies, but it's very different. If you haven't heard about it, than traditional companies, even very different than hyperscalers, and certainly extremely different from traditional companies. But I guess, if you have a world of agents as well, and you have then humans also in the mix, what does it mean to be a leader potentially in that kind of company? It's a general question, but do you have any thoughts here?
something that really clicked for me was when I started. I'm extremely interested in organizational design and leadership, as we've seen when we discussed. And when I was at Prototype, this kind of tech agency, the leader there was also very passionate about leadership. His favorite book was The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, something like that. He's a behavioral organizational psychologist. What I experienced when I was at Prototype is that they took the agile, we're talking about speed, which is about velocity. And to be able to experience that, you need to have a process, I think, that repeats itself in some way. You might not see it as a process, but I think the organization needs to start seeing itself more of like a pulse, a pulsation. You need to understand what pulses do we need to have on a daily basis, a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly, yearly, etc. And this is nothing new to product and tech development, right? But it's fairly new when it comes to if you build a company from scratch and are able to live and breathe this way and scale with it. Because you're able to do that, then it's a repetitive structure that works in the smallest unit.
And fractally scales.
I think that's the way we reach momentum. And then, dads and moms come to me and they say, okay, Per, what should I advise my kids to study?
Exactly.
It's a hard question. I'm curious to hear your points of it before.
I think I've said what I think, or what Elon thinks at least.
No, but elaborate a little bit on Anders.
No, but I believe, I've been a teacher myself. I worked in university after I did my PhD, and I've been a teacher. I think it's a super important skill, and the ability to communicate and be able to coach other people, I think, is one of the most important skills you can have. That said, I think it's even more important to have subject matter expertise in the subject you're going to teach in. So I would still say that the core should be either in like physics or computer science, which will be the core of so many things going forward. And if you have that, and then combine that with the ability to communicate and have leadership skills combined with that would be, then you'll be set for a really good future, I would say.
And I would add to that, where I think I use the word system thinking, like how you think about this. I even take that whole point with velocity and do the things in the different pulses that fractally scales, or I would do the extreme agile approach that is done in several of Elon Musk companies. That is a system. That is a system thinking in its core. What's the guy who's sort of coaching in
Joe
Tesla?
Justice.
What's his name?
Joe Justice.
So Joe Justice, in my opinion, he has then fine-tuned a thinking how should we operate and work? What are the fundamental first principles around how we do work and how we think about work? And with a very fundamentally super disciplined view on these first principles, they used to do it, and they do it extremely disciplined. So then it comes back to what Anders said with communication and all that. But I come back to, you need to have that kind of machine thinking, or whatever you want to call that, system thinking, finding your pulse.
It's leadership still, I think.
Yeah, but I've seen leaders who are completely human touch leaders, and they are really good at getting the team to feel happy, but their operation is chaos. We don't have it. What do you mean? Pulse meetings? What do you mean? Should we have an agenda in our meetings? There's no structure, right? And then you can take it out. Then you can take the ones who sort of, they've done the bureaucracy shit out of it. So they're over processed, and typically process from hell, but no principles, no guiding principles. And here we have something which is, in a sense, minimized of the fluff with the softer touch, and minimized on the bureaucracy, hardcore on principles, hardcore first principles. What's the mechanics that makes us click? And we don't ever budge on. So I think then you have, in the leadership context, you have the human touch, yada, yada, yada. You have the process leadership, and here now we have some sort of hardcore principle-oriented. first principles oriented leadership. I don't know how to put it, but you see what I mean? I think it's different how, you know, I see a ton of great leaders. I'm a bad leader with people in some senses, and I met so many great leaders on that sense, but they suck at the principles of doing what they should be doing.
So for a long time, if we look at, I used to work in the HR technology space, and more specifically at Nova, which is like a global top talent network. And what you could see there is what's the hottest thing on the block? Where do people want to go if they want to have a great career and be looked up to, admired in a sense? And I think this is interesting. I mean, when I studied my leadership course at Harvard under the exceptional John Paul Rollert leadership, he's one of the best thinkers in the world, I think, in this. He teaches in business ethics. And this is where you get really deep into what leadership is and what's needed. So what we got to and what he gets back to is the biggest thing we have to battle as humans is vanity. All of us are driven by vanity. So with that self-conscious, discovering that and realizing that and being aware of that is one of the first principles of being a leader, that you have to understand when vanity takes over, in a sense.
Because self-consciousness as well.
Self-consciousness, in a sense. But then going back to the questions, what do I advise parents that come to me and ask what their kids should study? Well, then you got to pick what's available in the university system, right? And the high school system.
You don't necessarily today, because there's so much available.
But that's the question that they're asking.
The mom is asking that.
So I could tell them, don't go to school, be entrepreneurs instead.
And a lot of people do, right?
Yeah, especially in
the US.
In the US.
But, exactly. You humor the mom. She wants her kid to study. Yeah. What do you say?
In the past, you would say study physics and study business administration. The combo of business school and advanced engineering degree. That was the ultimate thing. Now I think that it's more physics and behavioral science and systems thinking. And so instead of the business administration and the foundational courses of that, I believe that the new human sciences is like, it's arts, it's the history of ideas, it's anthropology, sociology, psychology.
Psychology,
I like that idea that the old school business, if I say that, what we thought, the double degree Handels KTH.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's KTH, and what else?
I don't know, but because physics, it's learning about the systems of natural sciences, right?
Which is fundamentals, I would argue still.
And this is another area where the US has a competitive advantage, because they're at college, everyone studies social sciences.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go back,
that's what I would advise.
It's more like, okay, what's the difference when we have a world of AI then, with a huge number of AI agents, etc., moving around? Will there be a difference in leadership, and what skills you should aim for then?
I think that is the difference that needs to happen. That it's not about being able to run a company from management is not any longer going to be about finances.
Because you can ask ChatGPT their technicality question.
Because GenAI can handle all the structures needed to run a company.
Yeah,
basically, it's going to be about how good you are at coping with other human beings and getting them to collaborate.
And getting them to collaborate,
understanding and reach goals.
Psychology of the market, psychology of getting people working together,
So alongside the physics and let's call it behavioral sciences, I believe that everyone needs to operate in at least one other or maybe two other arenas. So learn in practice. We got to get back to traineeship, being out there and learning, because otherwise you will never know the skill of dealing with people, building companies. So I think it's not enough to study the sciences. You also need to, while you're doing it, be doing stuff in the real world.
Okay, so let me add another angle here. I agree with this line of thought. There are several people who have been talking about the core trait, and I'm not sure which school you go to for this, but it's the whole thinking around we need to all be fundamentally curious. So we're getting to a point now where actually economies of scale or slow moving, everything is happening so fast. So you need to be super adaptive. You need to be you need to be super humble and maybe rethink many times around pivoting what you're doing and how you're doing things. So now we're getting to traits such as curiosity and adaptability. So where do I go to school for curiosity and adaptability? There's one argument here. One of the key topics here is to how do we work with methodic doubt, and this is ultimately being trained in scientific thinking.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
So even the STEM topic, but where we went to, the reason we go into the STEM topics is not only because we're going to learn about this, but we need everybody to fundamentally be schooled in scientific thinking. And this is something lacking in leadership today. So I'm reading a book now by Adam Grant, Think Again. He's talking about the challenge of relearning and unlearning. And then basically all these psychology studies that they've been doing, like who succeeds in pivoting, blah, blah, blah. And he has this, we have different communication styles, or we fall into different patterns. So the scientist thinker, and he has the politician who is there to persuade. He had the prosecutor who wants to stand his ground, etc., etc. So, and the argument, we all need more scientific thinking and methodic doubt in order to be willing to shed our old world model into a new world model. So then you're back to the STEM again, but it's the scientific thinking that is actually quite important.
Yeah, or what Elon would call first principle thinking in engineering.
Yeah, exactly.
But, what if we don't? I'm not sure what you mean with leadership. A lot of people use different, semantics for that.
I was thinking about that too. Are we talking about leadership or management, or are we confusing
people
the two?
management, or is it leadership in general? People management, what about if we don't need that in the future? Do you think we will still need people management in the future?
Define people management.
Having a manager that, you're having the appraisals with and is your manager.
So the difference between being a manager, I argue, I go to large companies, they have a lot of managers, but how many leaders do they really have? And then I take a look at leadership traits. Who are the true leaders? Steve Jobs is famous for picking out these 100 people. He didn't care in what role they were sitting, what managerial position they had. So we have administration, in my opinion, what management is all about, versus leadership.
Yeah.
That's my take, my definition.
And the question is, will we have managers?
Yeah, so I think, if we take the broad definition of leadership, meaning any person and every person should aim to be a leader, because that means basically you can guide people to go in the same direction, and together you can bring more value. And that's something that everyone should strive for. And then saying people managers are the people that actually have more of an overhead kind of role. But then you have, in traditional companies, these kind of huge levels of managers. And we don't need it in the future.
No, I think we're going to have facilitators, not managers.
I think so too. I think this is interesting.
Yeah.
What do you mean with that?
People that are, and this is where STEM comes in as well, because I agree with that, being able to work in a scientific way. Because otherwise everything that you do is lost work. So you got to attach it to a system, a process or something where you look at how can we improve this? A thesis, yeah. Well, how do we improve this over time? Because that's the only way also to decouple it from yourself.
So what is a facilitator?
A facilitator is someone who enables a process, a flow to happen, basically. And it typically, when people talk about facilitating a workshop, facilitating a process.
Okay, so driving some kind of event in some case.
Essentially, it's about facilitating a flow for humans that humans go through. And let's take these AI educations that I do, the AI adoption educations. What I essentially do there is I'm somewhat of an expert, but I didn't start by being an expert. The thing that I knew was how to facilitate.
But can I tweak your vocabulary a little bit? Because to me, what we're also talking about that is what is a lot of times called servant leadership. So instead of having the old school way, you have a manager. I'm supposed to be the principal deciding, and the team is the agents. The teams are doing what they're supposed to be done, and the brilliance of the teams flows from the manager. Old school thinking. Agile thinking, we talk about servant leadership, where I'm here to facilitate you as a team to have maximum flow, and maybe I'm helping you, guide you on other topics that are more important to us, but I'm really not there to do the job, or I'm expecting the team to be self-improving in terms of flow.
Yep.
But I'm there to fix the blockers. I'm there to let you fucking do your job.
Yep.
So
Still
for
an
me,
overhead in that case.
so you're an overhead, but you as a servant leadership, if you read that book, those books, you are not really set. You're not the product owner.
No.
So why could a facilitator or a servant leader be run by AI?
It could potentially could. I think it could. And then you get to the soft stuff. You get to.
I have a point with all of these questions.
So I have an example. So there is this, so digital meetings. That's even hard to facilitate for a human being. And this became very obvious during the pandemic, right? Oh, shut up. Oh, who's talking now? Oh, someone is in that room and the mic is not on.
I can do better there.
Exactly. There's this company, a startup here in Stockholm called Meatball. Have you tried it?
No.
They're using an AI facilitator for digital meetings. And then it like shifts who's in focus and who should say what. And it's exceptionally good because people are bad at stopping to talk, right? When they're supposed to stop to talk.
But I'm curious, Anders, why don't you bring this whole home? Because we're going down a rabbit hole, but you're sitting on a thesis here.
I mean, the point is that the Tesla Agile DNA is literally getting rid of managers.
Yeah. And I think so too.
So the only thing you have is digital self-management, meaning you basically have an app with AI where you do the self-management of yourself. And then you can also do you can basically grade people and say, who are the most important people, etc. That's what's happened when he came and took over Twitter. He basically asked people, who do you consider the most important people in this company? Then he got a list of people that are really important, not by listening to the manager, but by actually listening to the people and who they thought was most important. The second thing he did was saying, who of you are interested in being an engineer? If you're not interested in an engineer, there is the door. And then 80% of the people left, more or less, and he got stuck with the most important people, which could run the company.
I think it's...
But it's extreme, right?
If you ask the people who worked at Saplify when I was the CEO, I didn't think about it, but when you said it that way, I said multiple times, like, my goal is to make this independent of me as fast as possible.
Yes,
exactly.
This is the way I've been thinking about leadership, because it's not about me. It's about building a system that stands and scales on its own, that enables flow and so on. And what's needed then? Well, you need AI. I was saying that, okay, every individual here should have a dashboard in their phone that they can look at and make decisions on it on a daily basis. So the question is, other than data, what do you need? You need a value system.
Yeah.
What principles are we operating based upon that differentiate us as humans and in the way we communicate and behave? That plus data is what you need.
This is what I mean with the principle in the middle.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then you need a leader. And a leader in this case is someone who sets the vision, who says, this is where we're going. Where we're going.
But we need a vision, yes. But I think everyone should be a leader, though.
The teams are the entity. What you're getting to, in the sense, I think, is that the smallest unit is the team. So the team works together. We are all leaders of each other, and in relation to how our team functions and have flow. But this is interesting.
You have let's call it I still think the management team or the founding team in a way will be there. Those who control.
There should be engineers as well.
Yeah, what's this value system going to be? What's the technology? How does the system work? But then it doesn't necessarily need to be layers in between that and everyone who operates.
You don't think a founder should be a builder?
Yeah, they could be, but they got to convene in some way. I think they're going to convene to set a clear direction. You could have the whole group, let's say you have 100 people or 10 people. You could have the whole group convene and decide on where we're going to go and why. So you're saying that means that you don't need one person who decides. It's the flat organization. What do you call it?
I'm being a bit provocative here on reason, because I think it's fun to challenge people. And I'm certainly not saying that this is a good way to do it. But if you take the Tesla Agile DNA, they have this kind of super long-term vision, basically saying we want to be a multi-planetary species, or like Tesla, we want to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. A super long-term goal. And then everything they do in kind of decision on what they should prioritize and working with is automated in how much value it provides and how much closer it comes to the goal. So every bottleneck you have will pop up to the top and say, this is what we need to focus on. And then they come in every day and they say, okay, here I have, and every day, every second more or less, they update this list automatically. So all the time, this is what we need to spend time with and money on. And it's not a person doing that, of course, but everything is measured according to the long-term vision. So the only thing that needs to be like manually designed is the super, as they call it, 1,000-year goal. Everything else is automated. Super extreme. No companies working like this, except I think these kind of companies. And I think Elon, is of course operating as a dictator in these companies, which is not something that you would like to work with. But still, I think you can be inspired and see that potentially this is a bit where you're going, because everything is using AI to automate, how to prioritize, what to spend money on, and how to drive the work.
Because ultimately, if we distinguish between management as administration and leadership as leadership, the other traits, why wouldn't an AI system do the administration better?
I have a question. Who's going to... So everyone needs taken care of. Are you saying then that it's not going to be the company's role, where you get paid for being productive? They're not going to be in any way in charge of taking care of you.
Taking care in like what way?
Your human needs. So emotions, hardships you go through.
So they have a number of KPIs. They have one that says you're supposed to make sure that you and everyone else have fun. That's one of the KPIs. So if you do something that improves the funness, level of fun in a company, your rating goes up.
What about mental well-being? What about someone dies? What about there's an accident? What about...
You're probably not going to have that much fun then, right?
No, but I think it's a too simplified view, because in a complex world, the things that are going to matter more is when shit hits the fan. But maybe in that type of world, things will just redistribute automatically, and you will not care about that. They will just fall out because they're a weaker link.
In some way, this is of course very extreme.
Yeah.
But they still manage to guide and drive companies with hundreds of thousands of employees like Tesla in this more or less non-managerial kind of way at all. It's very strange, right?
And what also could be said is
dystopian future.
It not necessarily is dystopian. I think it can be very actually utopian.
But I think also what should be clarified is that not everybody who has worked with Tesla has found that this works for them. So I think what we are talking about is also then, okay, for some, if you go to the extreme, it will attract a certain personality and a certain person who has a certain personality trait, who actually don't think like on the softer side. If I go into the public sector, if I go into any large traditional company, I would argue there's a much broader spectrum of human individual.
And I think I have to do the normal disclaimer. I do not like the behavior of Elon. I do not like the behavior of Trump. So just get that out of the way so you don't think so. But I think you can be
as a thought experiment, and maybe looking at the pace of different companies working, indicating what happens when we increase the productivity frontier. So what we're talking about is the productivity frontier. And if you're arguing that the normal productivity is at 0, and then the hyperscale is 10x, and then we can argue then that this is 10x again. Yeah. So if the whole society is going up in the productivity frontier, then we can get a glimpse on what is life 2030 living at the productivity frontier at the baseline where Tesla is today. Maybe.
It's super interesting. Thank you for challenging my thinking. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight.
but it's about what happens when you escalate the productivity frontier, right? And now we're looking at a company that is potentially 10x before the hyperscalers. Potentially, I don't know.
Anyway, I think
super great fun.
Yeah. Okay, we should close it now.
13,000 reviews. Pro, good pay, shuttle transportation, long hours, stressful, no sleep, environmental fuels.
Work hard. I mean, it's
not for everyone.
I would not like to work there as well.
No, I'm not.
But they are very successful.
So we're saying they're going to compete on price. That's what we're saying, because they go all in on automation.
They get shitload of good people there. I mean, it's no question that people that are super ambitious want to work there.
So those people in China, they're very, 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 very competitive on the market. They work very hard.
But they don't feel like humans anymore. I mean, I've been in China. I got like an allergic reaction to the fact that a human is not seen as a human. It's just a cog in the machinery.
Yeah.
humans don't want to be cogs in the machinery. You want to be unique. That's why we have vanity.
Perhaps that's the advantage that we can have in Europe, then, to actually have some humanity left. I would love that to be true.
But
right?
then it comes back to what game are we playing? What are we competing against? What do we want to build as a society, right? Is this what we want?
Okay. This is turning out to be far too long. Per, let me ask you a final question, and let's try not to keep it a rabbit hole this time. We'll see how that goes. But okay, imagine we have an AGI future. Imagine a time where we have an AI that is better than an average coworker, and perhaps even an ASI, where an AI is better than all humans combined in some way. And that can lead to two extremes. We can think of one being very dystopian, and the AI is going to try to kill us all. When we have the Terminator, and the Skynet is being built now by Stargate. Sorry, I didn't say that. And then that could be really bad, and we have drones that are going to kill us all. Or it could be a utopian, where we have AI being, curing cancer and fixing the climate crisis, and we have fixed fusion energy, so free energy for everyone, and live in a world of abundance where goods and services are basically free for anyone to use. Where do you think we will end up when we have AGI? If we have AGI?
I'm a cynical optimist, so I would say utopian world. And if I'd summarize what drives me in one sentence, it's how can we leverage good leadership and modern technology to improve the world and society around us? That's the question that is driving my move in my professional life.
And do you also mean, if I'm extrapolating on what you're saying now, the destiny is in our hands to shape it where we want this to go?
Yeah, and it's about leadership.
This is the leadership
It's
part.
about good leadership and modern technology
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you run it off there. What do you think?
I like that.
Yeah, good.
Sharp answer. Perfect.
Clear ending. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Per Clingweld. Right.
Yep.
It Great debate today.
I was actually very positively surprised by all the rabbit holes that we ended up with. It's not how we're supposed to do these kind of things. But what the hell? It's an after work,
so much fun,
and it was super fun. And I hope you stay on for some more after work discussions off camera. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.